disclaim it. Therefore, there's no insurance problems, no bonding problems, and everybody's on their own, and consumer is out of luck. And fortunately for me, when they kind of found out, listen, Contractors Board was involved, that licensed person stepped up to the plate and fixed the problem. So kind of a weird scenario. It didn't have to go to court, but it happened to me. And what it taught me was when somebody calls our Contractors Board and we investigate and the investigation goes on, it doesn't get to the prosecutor's office until the very, 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 very end when all hope is lost. And now they're looking to me, and I'm thinking, if I win, how am I going to put somebody in jail? What am I going to do as a consequence to try to deter others, to punish misconduct, and try to recover restitution for the victims? So the partnership that we've developed, we focused on diversion of contractor, habitual, unlicensed contractor, and then circumstance, special circumstance type cases. In this case, it would be underground economy. The list I have is we team up with the insurance department, the labor department, the franchise tax board, the state board of equalization, and then we have a task force for public works fraud. When we pulled into the hotel today, did you see the tore up streets? You know, I'm not sure exactly how that person got that bid and how that person got, or that company got that contract, but I hope they have all their licenses. And I hope they didn't underbid everyone else. And that's the public works fraud that we're looking at, is how did you get those public works contracts? Then the other ones are, we had the natural disaster, the freeway complex fire, biggest fire in Orange County history, destroyed homes. Within 3 hours of the fire starting, we already had unlicensed contractors going up in the hills trying to bid up on jobs of homes that were still burning. Then 2 or 3 days later, when the fires were out and the safety danger was over, the homeowners are now trying to figure out how are we going to rebuild our lives. So the Contractors Board, we put up signs on all the hills saying, unlicensed contractors beware. Okay, we're watching, and homeowners beware, you're about to be solicited. And sure enough, they came in droves, signs or no signs, because the money's there, the insurance money's there, the homeowner wants the best deal possible. And what's better, pay full price for a licensed person to do it right, or take your chances? And there's a lot of people in the economy today will take their chances. And so even though they took their chances, we're still out there to protect those people. So we assign our cases in Orange County a little differently than a lot of other counties. Instead of the ticket going to court and then a prosecutor who has 50 other cases, anything from some assaults and shootings all the way down to unlicensed drivers, instead of that prosecutor being burdened with all these regulations, we say, listen, there's something special about these cases. So we look at the habitual ones, we look at the diversion of funds, the fraud cases, and we say, listen, let's hand it to somebody who actually understands the regulations and will work it from cradle to grave. The whole case. It's called a vertical case. So what we do is we take that. I appear in court at arraignment. An arraignment's the first time you come to court. I'll meet the person, talk to the person, and in most of our cases, it's somebody trying to make a buck. It's not a big company who's got a lot of money. So if I impose the minimum fine by state law of $5,000, the person was already underwater before even coming in and handling the case with me. So we try to do an education component. And this is the twist I was telling you about. If you want to plead guilty on a licensed contractor case and nobody's been defrauded anything, so it's from one of our sting operations. So we'll set up a house and we'll see who's the underground economy. It's from a report from a consumer. Listen, unlicensed guy, it's a report from a competitor. These people are underbidding me. And we figure out there was actually no money gained from it that needs restitution. We'll offer an education component where if you go and get your contractor's license, we will expunge your record. So you have hope for the future. The problem is that while you have a pending case, it's difficult to get through a background check to get your contractor's license. So once again, not only in the enforcement world, but also in the licensure world, the partnership exists between the prosecution agency and the enforcement agency. So the investigators I work with the Contractors Board, they call me up, what's the pending part of the case, we'll write it into the judge's order. We encourage getting the licensure. Once we get the person's license, they come back to court, they get the same penalty as anyone else would. But they get the benefit of clearing their record and moving on. And then the other option that the contractors enforcement folks wanted me to talk to you about today was called strict liability. For the board members, and I apologize to the public, I didn't pass out It's a color brochure. It's called mens rea. I want you to think about it this way. If you come into court and you're charged with homicide, the prosecution has to prove that you had the specific intent to fulfill the goals of your crime. Not just commit the crime by shooting the gun, but you wanted the person dead. Otherwise, it's an assault with a deadly weapon case. See the difference? Specific intent to kill versus no specific intent to kill, but intent to do the act that resulted in the harm. That's the difference between specific and general intent. So watch this. Unlicensed contractor comes in. The defense is, I was just trying to feed my family. I didn't know about the licensure regulations. I had no intent to break the law. I had no intent to steal anything from anybody. I was just trying to put in the pool. The jury's now looking at me saying, where is the intent? So to try to get around that, in Orange County, what we've been doing is we file what's called a 402 motion. It's basically a pretrial motion to the judge saying, Judge, in this case, the evidence is a little different, the regulations are a little different, the intent element is not there. And so I argue for strict liability. It's the third level. It's kind of like negligence. Listen, the issue isn't what the person was intending to feed their family or not. The issue is, did the person engage in conduct that's regulated over the dollar value that subjects them to regulation, period. At that point, the question is now, do they have a license or not? As soon as the board puts forward, there's no license in our records, the burden is now on them, the accused, to show a license or not show a license. But all I have to do is show the unlicensed conduct, not the intent. We are now 100% successful in the last 4 years of cases running the motion. I think the board put together a packet of what our revenue was in fines and restitution and other things. When I say court costs and all that, we've recovered over $500,000 in just regulatory type cases in the last 3 years. When I say $500,000, that's because you were fortunate enough to write into the statute, or you were smart enough to write into the statute, that we get cost recovery in some of these regulatory cases. So we'll step forward and we'll go through the motions of, yes, we're ready for trial, but Judge, please make a ruling on this. If the judge makes a ruling saying, yes, it's strict liability, what defense attorney, what contractor who's trying to defend themselves is ever going to step forward saying, what's your defense? So the defense is either, it wasn't me, or I was entrapped. And then we can anticipate those defenses. But by writing the motion up front to the judge, we just saved ourselves $15,000 a day in a jury trial. We've just got somebody a license who would never get a license, because until you catch me if you can, until you catch me, why should I comply with anything? And we've just evened the playing field for the licensed folks. But at the same time, we didn't put somebody away who otherwise wanted to get a license. So I told you about my Clark County case. I just want to run through 4 cases with you real quick. One is our sting cases running in Orange County. Statewide, throughout the state, Contractors Board, for the Nevada folks, we run blitzes and sweeps and stings, basically proactive cases to try to target the underground economy. So I included some materials on the successes that Orange County's included in that. We're no different than any other county, except for we are special in how we're approaching our cases. And because of how we're approaching our cases, I think is why we're having our 100% success rate. The next case is Zador. It's the one with the painter exhibits. These are all the exhibits from the case. So if I can run it through with you, you have competitors turning in an unlicensed painter. The suspicion is he's using lead, like the old paint that's recycled from the old wrecking yards or wherever he gets his paint. Who knows? But he's not licensed, so we don't know what he's doing or what his experience is. He has no insurance when he's up on the ladder and he falls in the house and sues the homeowner. So we're targeting specific conduct. We call him up. He shows up with a business card. There's his business card with somebody else's contractor's license number on it. We invite him to a commercial site. So it's not just a paint a wall site. It's paint an entire commercial building site, which is going to require crews and a lot of other stuff. So there's no question as to where we are in the dollar amount. And the competitor turned in his types of bids. So it's a blank sheet of what his bids were. The guy was smart. He wouldn't come into the sting. Handed his business card at the door, took off in his car, And then we get a phone call about a half hour later. And I'll tell you why he was smart in a second, but at the phone call a half hour later, he says, I saw the site. I don't need to see it. I'm internet savvy. I went on the internet and I pulled up the diagram from the management company for your commercial site. I don't need to measure it. I already know the square foot. It's on the internet. And then he sent his bid by email. The problem is this. If you're using Craigslist, if you're using Yahoo, if you're using email, one, how do you know who is on the other end of the computer typing that things? Is it him? Is it his wife? Is it his daughter? Is it his friend using the computer? Is he at a public library and somebody has access to the password? So you have all these weird issues as to who actually was behind the computer. Then the next step issue is getting compliance and cooperation from Craigslist, from Yahoo, from the internet provider. Who's the subscriber information on this? That's a huge step to try to get. So in our case, you see the bottom three exhibits. The contractor's license investigators pulled his information for licensure. None. We went to San Clemente saying, is there any license for the local business? None. And they issued him a notice to appear. Called him up on the phone saying you were invited to a sting. You provided a bid, although it was by email. And the guy on the phone said, I never came in. I didn't do anything. So that's the case that was presented. It's not easy. Okay, so on the next page, you see what happens when he got a lawyer. He walks into court. He produces his fictitious business name statement. He produces his City of Tustin business license. We're in San Clemente doing the sting. And his City of Garden Grove business license in an effort to show the jury, listen, but for the red tape of the big state, my guy was otherwise a good guy. And by the way, he denied it was him. It was my brother. It was somebody else using my internet, just like I talked to you about before. So the partnership I talked about is I anticipated what the defense was. I called up my enforcement team saying, what do you guys think? We got together for coffee, figured out a game plan, and as it turns out, in the contractor state license records, we warned this person before, telling him, please get a contractor's license. And we gave him all the education materials, and it's signed by him with a picture of him, of who signed it, and his fingerprint on the back. So we know he's on notice, and he's in the industry. Number two, my investigator went on Facebook. And there is his picture on Facebook with the registered domain name, with the email account that he was using to send us the information. And then number three, what I didn't tell you was the reason he was savvy to our sting is he was on probation in my county 1 year prior for the exact same thing. So he knew what was going on. At that point, the jury found him guilty. So, but it took the extra step, and it took that partnership. Can somebody tell me what he got? The minimum for a second-time unlicensed contractor, a habitual contractor, in California is 90 days in jail. And I think it's a $4,500 fine, up to $10,000. He got probation. The judge suspended the time and gave him probation. So I did all that, and then he's on probation. So at that point, even though I had to jump through the hoops, our education component kicked in. We called him up saying, listen, you're now on probation. Don't make us call you again undercover to do another sting. We want you to feed your family. Here's how to do it right. We got him into a class. He's now a licensed contractor. Well, now he's a licensed contractor on probation, but he's a licensed contractor for the next 3 years, and then he'll be off probation. So I've included some big cases that we've handled in the last year or two, just for your reference. One is the worst Angie's list, Mr. Crescent, who is in state prison. I think that's in your Board of Information, or Board of Contractors License Board handout. Mr. Crescent is a habitual offender who likes to prey on the elderly. What he'll do is come in and then try to bid up and try to upsell, and at the end of the day, he'll walk away with your money. He was in multiple counties. And that's one of the issues to consider that I'll be bringing up with you at the end, is somehow we have to coordinate our efforts between states, between counties, between cities even, and then especially between prosecution agencies. Not every prosecutor's office handles cases the same. Number two, this is Mr. Checo's case. Mr. Checo of Huntington Beach is a 70-year-old man. He's been in the business for longer than I've been alive. And he lost his license a long time ago, but just continued to continue on. And he said, "You'll never catch me." We did. So you can read about the story about how he agreed to restitution to pay back all the people he defrauded rather than go to prison. We did it that way because a 70-year-old in prison who gets county jail is going to be one of the first people out the door. That's what I was thinking. At the same time, if I sentence somebody to 10 years who's 70 years old, that's a life sentence for unlicensed contracting. So I thought maybe pay back all of the victims in the case, and we'll talk about probation. And that was successful. And then the last one I want to talk to you about is a current case we have. This gentleman, Mr. Damos, is a pending case. It's set for trial in a month. Allegedly, he went up to the city of Brea, Yorba Linda, during the fires, and he's one of the ones who, "I'll bid on your house to rebuild your house," up in the fire disaster area, which is a special crime in California. It's not only unlicensed contracting, it's elevated because of the disaster area. Well, because of that, we had our prelim. He was held to answer. The trial's now coming up. He skedaddled, that's a legal term for, became a fugitive, to South Carolina. Now the problem is what police agency is going to go get him in South Carolina to bring him back to justice? And the problem is, in California, our resources are so small, we don't have police officers assigned to these cases for Contractors Board. So we're partnering, Contractors License Board, DA's office, Sheriff's Department. In this case, Brea Police Department, a very, very good police detective named Sandy Stone, said, "Listen, my partner and I will go get him." So we flew to South Carolina and brought him back, and his trial is next month. But the problem is that if you leave the state, because the state's unfriendly to you, and you leave behind a disaster of victims, the victims are still here. You're out in Nevada unlicensed contracting, or you're out, in my case right now, in Colorado. Same thing. I got a call this morning saying we have somebody in custody who skedaddled from California to Colorado, and they're bidding on jobs in Colorado instead. So I want to show you that it takes a village, right? It takes a partnership between everyone. I hope I've done a good job last 3 years for your board. I plan on continuing. The issues that I'd like you to consider, please. The Enforcement Board and I are taking up kind of the three big issues that now we have success in court. How do we roll this back? How do we work with our investigators to do a better job at, one, when somebody doesn't show up to court? How do we enforce court orders, probation orders, or orders to appear? So we need to have the police resources to take these crimes seriously. At the same time, we have to have compassion and understand that, listen, our goal in the case is to get the person licensed and to level out the economy, not necessarily to throw somebody in prison. Number two, statewide consistency, as we talked about. And number three, I would not have won that Zador case we talked about the painter, but for the fact that the Contractors License Board had an organized administrative process. They had the files, they had the priors, they had the tickets. They only went for criminal prosecution of the habitual offenders. Nobody wants to come to jury duty and watch some guy who bid he bid $510 for a ceiling fan. They just don't want to see that. What they want to see is he bid $510 for a ceiling fan and was on triple probation for ripping off everybody else he put ceilings and fans in for. So once we start showing the pattern, once we start showing that we did everything we possibly could as a government administratively to get the person regulated, we have a lot more success when we come to court. Do you have any questions?
You might want to turn on your mic, Pastor. Pull the switch towards you.
Thank you. Since resources are so limited, is there any way that as part of the settlement that you reach with these perpetrators, that they impose a fine that you could set aside for your offices to do, some of the things that you lack funding to do? I mean, you do right now have the condition that they have to go to school to get a license. Could that be an additional way of you being able to get some resources?
In California, if I charge an unlicensed contracting case, it's a Business and Professions Code section 7028. If I'm smart about how I approach it, we could also get what's called restitution under 7028.2. That point 2 section says any fines imposed by the court shall return to the prosecuting agency. So we do recover the fines imposed, but the trouble is that we look at the person who's, if you get in as a lawyer, if I'm driving home or driving back to work today after after this board meeting and I get hit by a car, I want it to be a very nice car that's insured, okay? Because if I get hit by somebody, obviously, who's not insured or can't afford to pay anything, I'm going to be out of luck, but for my own insurance. And that's kind of the hit and miss that we've been seeing in these court cases, is the person will step forward saying, I was out there, I didn't have a license because I didn't have any money, and I don't have the training, background, experience to even be doing the work in the first place. I don't want to work for somebody else because I can make too much money on my own, but I don't have any money. So what am I going to do? So the judge could say, well, the fine's $5 million. I could be getting all, or the prosecuting agency can be getting all the money back. But if the person doesn't have the money to pay, we're out of luck because they're just going to ask for community service. But the answer is yes. We have a statute in California to get the cost recovery. I've also kind of worked out a cost recovery for the investigative time. In California, if you're charged in a criminal case, you're not supposed to be able to also have to pay the burden of law enforcement costs. That comes from our taxes. But if you're trying to settle a case for something less than the fine that's supposed to be imposed, or you're supposed to settle a case for something less than jail, it's really up to the parties to come up with a plea agreement. So what I usually do is ask the Contractors Board, how much investigative time did it take to bring this person to justice? And then I offer that up. If you want to pay this up front, maybe I can save you some of the back-end fees that the court may otherwise impose.
So I was thinking the future things that the person now that she has a contract, some type of a future thing that they can have, then you could correct
I think it would be a great idea to get a judgment and then maybe attach that judgment to future earnings. The problem for them would be is I'm already in the hole and you're putting me further in the hole, but at the same time, that is kind of a prosecutor's attitude. And so I'm with you on that is, listen, here's the law. You broke the law. We usually give you a probationary chance. The ones I usually see are the habitual offenders. So you're right. Those folks, it's kind of hard to feel sorry for them if they're habitually out there doing that.
Good. Steve?
Don, this is to you, I think, but you mentioned a case that in Colorado, let's suppose that they don't have the resources to go extradite this guy from Colorado. Could we utilize the Division of Investigation in a case to go pick up someone in another state and bring him back? I mean, I know we used to have our own staff used to go with peace officers all over the country since the travel cutbacks have occurred. Do you know if D of I ever does that kind of stuff?
I don't know if they actually do that. Although they are one
especially if it's a major case or something that, all right.
Okay, are there any other questions from John? Well, I believe we already do partner with them, John, with the insurance companies. do that, David? Do they're aware of that, I'm sure. Okay.
That is one of the reasons I think I was recruited for the contractor's license cases. One, it's a specialty, and the laws are so much different than we're taught in law school. To learn all these enforcement rules it's really strange. And I use that to my benefit when we get to court, because the defense attorneys they have to get up to speed to take on me, who's been doing this for a long time. So that's nice. But my background is code enforcement. So I know a lot about building safety permits. And so the one thing we're trying to do in our county is we have 34 different cities. And then we have 30% of the county, which is unincorporated. Each of the cities have its own city attorney, its own building departments and building officials. So we're trying, me with my boss, we're trying to corral in the 34 different cities and the unincorporated areas through me to try to get the building departments, when they're issuing permits, to have some type of requirements and checks for the insurance. As the double check I think that you're thinking of is, listen, before we issue permits, or listen, before we allocate the insurance money, this gets checked at least to make sure the person is licensed and who they say they are, so the homeowner doesn't get bamboozled. Is that a good word?
It's kind of like skedaddled.
I didn't want to use legal terms today, but bamboozle and skedaddle are the two I'll take from the
Yeah, my head's spinning already from the legal terms. Well, I personally want to thank you, James, and I know that I've got a script here to read for you that it details many of the things you've brought up in a little more detail, and we truly want to thank you. The CSLB has enjoyed a long-standing relationship with Orange County District Attorney Tony Rakakis and his staff. The Orange County DA's office has been instrumental in prosecuting consumer harm complaints. They have also played a lead role in battling underground economy violations. I'd like to take this opportunity to honor Orange County District Attorney Tony Rakakis and Deputy District Attorney James Young. Mr. Rakakis, as has been already stated, could not be with us today due to a prior engagement. However, we've been fortunate to have James Young speak with us. And for those of you who know James, you know that he has been an invaluable partner to us, as he has reiterated, in our efforts to protect consumers and unlicensed operators and scofflaws in the construction industry. James' commitment to prosecuting individuals who commit construction fraud and take advantage of homeowners sets an example for all deputy district attorneys in the state. And he is a leader in consumer protection, has an amazing conviction rate, 100% I've been told, which is phenomenal. And I personally want to congratulate you as an Orange County citizen, and I truly appreciate the stellar work that you've done. He has filed 180 misdemeanor and 12 felony cases since 2007, and has achieved a remarkable 100% conviction rate. In addition, James' filings have assisted victims in collecting restitution, collected CSLB cost recovery costs, and imposed penalties and fines on unlicensed contractors totaling $531,677.82. Some of you may remember James played an instrumental role in prosecuting Dwayne Cresson, a convicted felon who repeatedly contracted without a license. Between 1994 and 2002, CSLB received 53 complaints against Dwayne Cresson for contracting HVAC projects without a license. CSLB investigators referred 26 of those complaints to local prosecutors in Orange and LA counties. In 2002, Cresson pled guilty to 14 counts of felony theft from an elder adult and 2 counts of felony grand theft, and was sentenced to 3 years in state prison for each conviction, all to run concurrently. Unfortunately, shortly after being released, Mr. Cresson soon resumed his unlawful contracting activities, resulting in 7 consumer complaints filed in 2008.
And that prior case wasn't mine, by the way.
That was
the Los Angeles case that he pled to and got concurrent time.
Oh, that's the one that let him off?
That's the one that let him off.
Oh,
yes.
L.A. That's why I live in...
That's why I love Orange County.
That's why I live in Orange County. Unfortunately, shortly after being released, Mr. Cresson... Well, I read that. Deputy District Attorney James Young prosecuted the case, and in July 2011, Cresson pled guilty once again to 1 count of felony theft from an elder adult, 1 count of felony diversion of construction funds, 2 counts of felony misuse of a contractor's license number, and 2 misdemeanor counts of contracting without a license with a prior conviction. Dwayne Cresson was sent back to state prison as a second-strike felon thanks to a partnership between CSLB investigators and the Orange County DA's office. he was sentenced to 4 years, 4 months in state prison. This is a good example of the complex complaints successfully investigated and prosecuted in Orange County. There are additional highlights in the handout, and it is my understanding that James will and he already did share a few of them with us. Although not all investigations result in filing of criminal charges, we appreciate the invaluable guidance that James provides when handling our cases. James, for these efforts in your leadership, we would like to present a small token of our appreciation, and I'd like you to come up forward and accept a certificate of appreciation for yourself and Orange County Deputy District Attorney, or District Attorney Tony Rackauckas. I'd like to read the certificates. The California Contractors State License Board Certificate of Recognition presented on June 5th, 2012. James A. Young, Orange County Deputy District Attorney, in recognition of your strong partnership with Contractors State License Board enforcement efforts and your outstanding commitment to the construction industry and protection of the California consumers. On behalf of the Contractors State License Board, thank you very much for all your work. The one for the boss is the same thing. There's four of the boss, so this one's a much more important one. Let's take it. Well, I'm going to take that. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, that will conclude item E on your agenda. At this time, we'll move to item F, which is a closed session. So I'll have to ask everyone in the audience, any non-California board members and necessary California board staff to stay, and everyone else must clear the room, please. It'll be about 10-15 minutes at the most. And Don Chang, would you want to come forward?
Okay, just send
California and Nevada board to please take their seats. I'd like to get this started again. Okay, we're back in session. We'll move on from agenda item F to G, Enforcement Committee report. David Folt will give us the Enforcement Committee report. David? I believe all the mics are now live, so be aware of that.
Good. Okay, thank you. Now, if we could just turn to page 2, I'd like to provide an update on a couple of our enforcement activities in California. The first one relates to building permit enforcement. We do have a program in place where we prioritize referrals from building officials. Last year, we did receive 66 referrals. We're also allowing the public to file anonymously when they're aware of a project being done without a building permit. And in the last 8 months, we have received 150 referrals. We have really a zero tolerance for permit avoidance. If we receive a complaint at our intake mediation center, they have to resolve it, get a permit, complete any work that needs to be done to comply with the permit. And we will not cite. If they do that, if it's referred out to field investigation, it does result in a citation. At the bottom of page 2, we included an elder abuse case. And the reason we included this, it's something that we continue to focus on. And when we look at elder abuse and how they are vulnerable and often have resources to pay for work, and sometimes they have resources to pay for work that doesn't need to be done or isn't in their best interest. And what comes to mind are the advertisements that many of you have perhaps seen regarding the tub enclosures. We have a company that's advertising in California and Nevada to install tub enclosures for $15,000, $16,000. Well, they're spending upwards of $40,000 a month on this advertising. but they're targeting this to the elderly. These tub enclosures are valued at $3,000 or $4,000. In California, you have to provide a 3-day right to rescind. There's a cooling off period. They're not affording the customer the cooling off period. They're generally asking for 100% up front. They're sending out unregistered salespersons that are using strong-arm tactics. In the next year, this is going to be the number one focus for the California Contractors Board Enforcement Division to address this problem. And yesterday, I had the pleasure of meeting with Dan and George from Nevada, and they're also going to be part of this. We've done a lot of intelligence. We'll be sharing that with our friends from Nevada. Just on page 2 and 3, you'll see where we have our restitution to the public. Don't have a recovery fund in California, but we do focus on getting restitution to injured parties. And you can see for this calendar year, we've been successful for recovering approximately $4 million. On page 4, another elder abuse case that we highlighted, and it shows that if we're, the intake mediation center case we had on the prior page, we were able to resolve it. We got a full refund, and that's something we're fairly good at. These contractors that are using these strong-arm tactics to victimize the elderly are generally, again, not providing the necessary notices and the right to cancel, so they do have to return the money. But they don't all refund the money, and this is why we've included this highlight to show that by working effectively with prosecutors like James Young and others, we are able to get felony charges and convictions along with jail time. And you'll see that this Ronaldo Roldan, he did receive 5 years probation. He got 180 days in jail, and he had to refund $368,000 to his victims. We have right below that a Los Gatos home, interior designer, and again, it was interesting. She was convicted yesterday. She pled out, and she did plead to 1 year in jail. So she's someone that had victimized a number of different individuals by posing as an interior designer, when in fact she was actually a contractor. On page 7, I wanted to talk about our mandatory settlement conferences. We do continue to issue citations for those offenses that we do not believe warrant revocation of the license. And in the middle of the page, you'll see that we did schedule 53 mandatory settlement conferences. Our goal is, when we've issued a citation to a licensee, to assist that licensee in correcting the business practice and resolving that citation, to provide 5 years disclosure on the on our website, restitution to the injured parties, but to avoid the unnecessary expense of going to an administrative hearing. You'll see that out of 53 citations that were issued this calendar year, 32 were settled through a mandatory settlement conference. We can also settle at the Attorney General's office, so that while our staff may not have been successful in settling it, the Attorney General's office will give it another shot and try to avoid the cost of the hearing. The average cost of a hearing for a citation in California is $5,000. So by settling these citations, we saved $160,000, and you'll see that we were able to collect $256,000 in civil penalties, with $444,000 returned to injured parties. On page 8, we've provided highlights of our proactive enforcement activities. You'll see that we've covered our spring blitz. We're now gearing up for a summer blitz, and what we do, many of you know, is we conduct stings simultaneously throughout California. It's going to be a little bit different at this one. You'll see that in the prior sting, I provided some highlights as to the type of individuals we're calling out, those that are repeat offenders, they're child molesters. Many of them are collecting public benefits, but yet they're out contracting without a license. For our next series of stings, we're going to do the same type of targets with one exception. One of the sting days will be to partner with other states. We're happy to be partnering with Nevada, Oregon, Utah, and perhaps even Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, and perhaps Rhode Island, and trying to get nationwide coverage of these activities. In California, there's a lot of interest from our legislators. We have bipartisan support to be part of the press conference. So we're real excited about focusing on that this summer. On page 10, provided a highlight of our partnering with other state agencies. We're members of 2 general partnerships. One is the Joint Enforcement Strike Force, but the other one is the Labor Enforcement Task Force, and that's what we've included in this packet today. This is where we work with our partners within the construction industry to identify targets. Generally, these are licensed contractors that have been identified as being in the marketplace that are not withholding payroll taxes. They're underreporting their payroll to the workers' comp carrier for the purposes of gaining a lower premium for their workers' comp. and they have unsafe work conditions. And by working with our industry partners, we've had a much greater success rate than we had with the prior type of task force we had in 2011. You'll see the numbers for 2012 that the Contractors Board here in California looked at 148 contractors and found 88 of them in violation. Generally, on the next page, on page 11, you can see they're generally either unlicensed, they have workers' comp violations, advertising, or some other type of violation like out of classification. But most importantly, our partners are having great success. We're finding 80% of our targets are in violation of a serious labor or tax law, and that's the focus. Part of this is to work with Employment Development Department, and I think you may have a Revenue and Taxation Department in Nevada, but in California we have an Employment Development Department that oversees the withholding of payroll taxes. They work very closely with Internal Revenue Service. And our goal for this year is for EDD to conduct 768 tax audits. We look at that as a way that our industry partners, our law-abiding contractors, are being hurt. And I'm pleased to report that they're well over 50% of achieving that goal. And if one suggestion came from Frank Jetter today that it could be even more successful if we can get the material records. If by working with EDD we're able to determine through the Board of Equalization here in California sales tax records as to how much material is being purchased and marry that to the EDD records, we'd have more success with our audits. We have done that on one trial basis, and our average assessment tax audit was $200,000 in the pool plastering industry. So it did have some success, and that's something that we're going to pursue further, thanks to Frank's suggestion. On page 13, we have a training update. We've continued to provide training to our staff, both in-house and also obtaining outside vendors to meet their needs. And what you have here is the more structured training that's been provided to the staff. We also have other training that they sign up for and that we pay them to attend. Just later in the packet, we felt very fortunate to have our friends from Nevada attend one of the training sessions in the last month. And starting today, we kicked off what we call our Module 3. And this is the trainers. We have a retired CHB captain that's very good at investigating and writing reports, and a deputy attorney general that serves as the instructor for this course. And it provides our staff some real-life examples as to how to perform these investigations, how to apply the case law, and also how to write the reports and testify at a later date in an administrative hearing. And on page 20 and 21, just wanted to touch on the partnership we had with our colleagues from Nevada in conducting stings in California and Nevada in May. Again, it was very successful. We did the same type of sting operation a year ago. I did talk to our staff that participated in that sting, and they said once again how they wanted to emphasize how much they like working with their counterparts from Nevada and how they learn from each other, how they can learn from each other about best practices. And what they thought was most interesting is that in Nevada, there's no exemption for advertising. In California, you can advertise and say that you're not a licensed contractor. It's a bit of a loophole. Don't have that exemption in Nevada. It makes it a little bit easier to sometimes enforce the law. Also, you in Nevada have a $1,000 limit for minor work. In California, it's $500. And they like the low-key approach and just the way that you approach things in general. And I think in a few minutes, I'm going to introduce Karen Smith. And then once Karen finishes her presentation, it's my understanding that George will take the podium and talk a little bit more about the sting and some other Nevada enforcement activities. Are there any questions about the update so far?
Dave, just one item, and just for the Nevada, the cooperation, the partnering that we have is just, it continues to be a great resource for us, and we certainly want to thank you and your staff for allowing us to attend that. I think that's the essence of the partnering, where we can tap in your resources and you can in ours. So thank you very much for that. Do we have anyone from the Nevada board, George, Dan, that want to comment on the partnering approach there? Okay, thank you.
And just one final thing that I think, a problem that we may share with Nevada, I think it's more prevalent in California, is making sure that those that are qualifying for a license are actively involved in the business. And recently we've had some concerns over a company known as RMO Agency and how they're partnering up qualifiers with prospective businesses, mainly like off-the-shelf corporations. And I just wanted to mention that after the meeting today, Bill Vermeulen and Rick Pierce have invited me to attend a meeting with them, and we're going to talk about how they operate, and they're going to explain their business practices, and maybe we can come up with some ideas by working with our counterparts in Nevada as to what we want them to do to make sure the public is protected. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Karen Smith. Karen Smith is a 23-year veteran of the dispute resolution industry. As president of the CSLB's arbitration provider, AMCC, she has assisted, or she's been directly involved in over 6,000 arbitration cases. And when she's not doing a CSLB arbitration case, she's helping to resolve disputes worth hundreds of millions of dollars in other areas, both for insurance and other construction-related matters. So with that, my pleasure to introduce Karen Smith.
Sounded a little more dramatic than it actually is. Thank you. I'm always very excited to be here and see so many friendly places, especially Nevada. I get my first trip to Red Rocks this upcoming September, which I'm, thank you, really looking forward to. Okay, so I have somewhat of an extensive handout. If you call 6 pages extensive, I promise I'm not going to go through it today. I really just want to touch on some, well, there it is. I really want to touch on some highlights that's been happening in the last year. The last 4 pages are just really background on the arbitration program. But I am pleased to say we did have another successful year in 2011, and that's largely due to the help that we received from the CSLB. Dave Fote and Maria Subia, who's not here, and Janice Hards, they are incredibly responsive and helpful. And whenever there's a question, everyone who knows me has heard me say this so many times. I always think I can't be surprised anymore, and sure enough, something pops up, and it's you know, just something altogether new, and the CSLB really makes this program efficient. I have some statistics for you. 610 arbitration complaints were resolved during our calendar year, which is a little different from your year, which I think goes July through June, if I'm not mistaken. We do ours on a calendar basis. So 610 complaints, and the awards totaled approximately $3.7 million to the prevailing party. Now, I use that language specifically, prevailing party, because that does not mean it's to the homeowner or, as the CSLB refers to them, the consumer. The AMCC, being an arbitration firm, which is highly governed by case law as well as statutory law, necessarily sees the parties as equal. We're not an arm of the CSLB or the Consumer Protection Agency. When the parties walk in, the homeowner and the contractor come in on equal footing. In fact, we do not receive the CSLB's investigation file. The parties are responsible for bringing in their own evidence and testimony to prove their case. Both sides have to prove their case. So that $3.7 million doesn't mean that went to the homeowner or the consumer. It went to whichever party prevailed in that matter, being either the homeowner or the contractor. And I don't know if you have the same experience we do. The homeowners continue to get more and more sophisticated, as do the contractors. So again, going back, I continue to be surprised. I am going to, with California, touch on a little bit at the end. The couple that was here at the last board meeting, there's a bigger picture, and a couple little details on that I wanted to make you aware of. Now, this is a statistic I'm proud of and very surprised by. The time from when the award, when we get the case assigned, that means the day it comes in the mail to us and the day that we get the award out, decreased by 1 day. It went from an average of 48 days down to 47 days. And I'm surprised by that because it just seems in our day-to-day business, you know, they get dragged out and we grant continuance after continuance. But when all was said and done and we compiled it, we managed to get it down by one day to 47 days when we hear these cases. And people are generally pleased with that. I mean, they want resolution in their lives. These aren't new disputes by the time they get to us. The evaluations of the arbitrators continue to be high. We give them an evaluation after every single hearing, and we ask them to turn them in. We have over a 50% success rate of returning our evaluations, and the arbitrators have achieved a 4.8 and 4.8 out of 5 for, well, AMCC has a 4.8, and the arbitrators have a 4.85. Two things I want to touch on. I'm not going to go into them at length, but some policy changes. These have to do with, like I said, arbitration is very tightly governed by law. So we don't have a lot of room here. We do what the law tells us to do. But, you know, dealing with people, there's always a little dynamic there. So some of the small changes we've made is before, when we started the program, you know, we gave no explanation on the award. Correct paint, you know, application. And that was it, and there was a dollar amount if it was due to the homeowner. But we found that that wasn't necessarily satisfying to the people whose lives have been embroiled in these disputes. So we'll add just a little bit. And we'll say something along the lines, you know, correct paint application due to poor workmanship, or it wasn't in the contract, or whatever the case may be, just so the parties can feel a little bit more satisfied with the information that they're getting at the end of the process. And we've established a policy regarding affirmative defense. So if the contractor comes in and has an affirmative defense, in other words, they say it wasn't in the contract, it wasn't my fault, homeowner wouldn't let me back on site, this is the tile they picked. This didn't necessarily change. It's just been confirmed more so in writing that the contractor has to prove what their affirmative defense is. They can't just say it. You know, they have to have all the documentation to prove, which is consistent with the policy for both parties regardless. So that was just a small thing that we decided to put in writing. Now, one of the bigger challenges that the arbitrators faced is that the parties come in and they're not necessarily prepared for the nature of an arbitration proceeding. So basically what happens is, you know, they come in, they're supposed to have all their evidence and testimony, they're ready to go, present to the arbitrator, they hash out any questions, you know, they discuss it, arbitrator goes away, makes a decision, renders an award. Well, a lot of times the parties go in and they say, oh, I didn't know this was going to be a binding process. I mean, we even have attorneys who come in and say, oh, I thought this was a mediation. I mean, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's kind of like a car salesman. I'm talking about attorneys. My apologies. And they'll come in and say, oh, you know, it's like a car salesman pointing to a motorcycle saying, I hope you enjoy your new minivan. I mean, they're just two totally different animals. So some steps that we've taken to try to overcome this challenge is we asked the CSLB to add to the submission form. The submission form is what the parties fill out to say, I want to arbitrate my dispute. So it has a lot of language on there. We hope they read it, but we're kind of guessing that they don't always. So at the bottom of the form, and this is page 2 of my handout, we've asked them to initial to say, I understand that an award rendered hereunder will be binding and final, and there is no initial appeal process available in this forum. So that is so that they understand this is done. This is your chance. This is your bite of the apple. You don't get 2 bites of the apples. And then secondly, you have in yours, it's a neon little box in there, and this goes out on the front of every hearing notice. I did some research before I came here and before we went into these policies. There are 8 different places in the 2 in the CSLB paperwork, 6 in AMCC's paperwork that says this is a final binding arbitration process. This is your chance to get your case heard. However, many times the parties will come to the hearing and they say, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to bring everything today. So what we did is we made this little attention page that says, read your notice, read your frequently asked questions, come fully prepared to present your case on the day of the hearing, and the award is final and binding. There really is no appeal process at all. You can go to the court and you can say, you know, the arbitrator was biased, there was fraud. There's 2 or 3 reasons that they can do what's called vacating the award. In other words, it gets overturned and goes back to arbitration. But hopefully, I mean, at this point, I don't know what else to do. But, you know, hopefully that they understand that this is their chance to get their case heard. It's been effective so far. It's been in place for about 8 weeks now, and I polled the arbitrators. They're all quite pleased with it. And again, I have to commend the CSLB and mostly Dave who got within, I think, 2 weeks, that first language I read to you put on the submission forms that go out to the parties. And that's, I mean, that's some fast turnaround right there. So we do have some goals. I do want to touch on the couple that was here last time, and then I want to tell you some goals that we have. My understanding is that they were very, and apologies to Nevada because this might not resonate with you, but they were very upset with what their award was. The homeowner was awarded a full $50,000 against them. I'm not going to get into details of the case because, you know, that's not what I'm here for. But there is a much larger picture there. But I did want to let you know that they did fill out the evaluation form. And I quote, "We are very pleased with the arbitrator, and given his experience and knowledge, we are depending on him to assess a value to the property in question that is fair and undisputable. We look forward to receiving his decision and finally having closure." Gave them all 5s. And finally, on that note, and I'm not going to say anything else on the case, but unless you have any questions, they did appeal to the court to overturn that arbitration hearing, and the court denied it, and hopefully that means it's a closed case both for us and for the CSLB. So I just wanted to quickly address that. We do have two goals. I have 2 goals for the arbitration program. I'd like to see the voluntary limit. This is currently set at $50,000. This is where both parties decide they want to go to arbitration, both the homeowner and the contractor. It's currently at $50,000. I mean, as we know in California, it can sometimes be hard to get your house painted for $50,000. So we would like to get that increased to $100,000 if possible. And we would like some room somehow in the statute that allows a little bit of discovery before the process, just so both parties go in on the same playing field and all the information is available to both parties prior to the hearing. We don't currently have that right now. So that's something I'll broach with Dave, and hopefully we can get some movement there. But that's it. That's my update for today. Any questions or?
Lisa?
I just want to say that I think everybody really appreciates. I mean, I know it's like hitting them over the head with a hammer with telling them 6 times and now it's yellow and bright. But when consumers do come in here and they bring up valid complaints or not valid complaints, we need to address them.
Agreed.
And so making it, okay, if you say you didn't understand all that, great. We'll make sure that somebody down the line does.
Yeah, agreed.
So it might seem a little excessive, but even for the people that don't read their paperwork, it's hard to miss it now.
Sure.
So that's a good thing.
Thank you. Yeah,
Joan?
I agree.
Just a quick comment. I learned yesterday, and I didn't know this, that the process is a 1-day process, the arbitration itself, and that the cost to the board is $800. And I just think that we get a big bang for the buck out of all of that.
Oh, thank you. It is there's 2 parts to it. There's mandatory, which is set to be with the bond limit, which right now is $12,500. That's up to the homeowner to decide whether they go or not. And then the remaining $12,500 to $50,000 is they both decide to go. And so the mandatory, we try to schedule 2 in a day. And then the voluntary, the bigger ones, sometimes they're up to 3 days. I mean, I got to commend the arbitrators for that because they're working for about $5 an hour at that point. But they're a good group of people. They're very committed to the program. And, you know, I wish they were here. I'd give them a plaque.
Jim had a question.
Yeah, real quick, and this might be a better question for Rick. Rick, is this CSLB arbitration at a glance, is that on the webpage? The question is, I get a lot of contractors asking me about it, and I know this looks like a really good piece of information that we might want to put on a webpage.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
You have your handbook on the web as both a doc and a PDF. And then on our website, we have it on there and your handouts. And everything that we send out has our website on it, with a link to that information. So, I mean, of course, I'm happy to provide it if you want to put it on your website.
Thanks.
Good?
Okay, any other questions? Lisa?
2 further questions. Does raising the threshold from 50,000 to 100,000 and allowing for a little bit more discovery, are those legislative changes, or what? How would those goals be accomplished?
It would have to be a legislative change.
Okay, that's answered my question. Thank you.
If I might follow up on that, We did try and raise the arbitration rate a few years ago. I think it was the trial lawyers opposed it. It got hung up in the legislature. As we go into the legislative proposal process, I might ask the board to let us go talk to the two committees to see if there's some way we can raise the limit. And I just had an idea. Right now, the 12.5 tied to the bond, maybe we can look at an incremental change in that, maybe 15,000 or something. So I'll talk to Karen and Laura and David and maybe flesh out a couple of those ideas for future legislative changes.
Pastor?
Just wanted to ask you, your evaluations that you mentioned, what is the return rate on those? How many people actually respond? And do you have a breakdown by whether it's the complainant or the consumer or the contractor that does respond to those evaluations?
We do. I don't have my specific numbers available. I apologize. I didn't prepare for that. We do have it broken down by how many, we call them complainants, and how many respondents return those. It's pretty close on who responds and who doesn't. I will tell you a very important part of that evaluation process, though, is we ask for them prior to rendering the award. The reason why is if they respond with their evaluations after the award, then it's really a response to the award. So the questions that are posed on there are, two have to do with the CSLB, who, by the way, ranks very high, well above, I think, 4.2 or 4.3 out of 5. Were we efficient? And people get most mad at us because we don't grant a lot of continuances to hearing dates. Were we professional? Was the arbitrator professional? Does he seem knowledgeable? So they're really questions geared towards the process itself and not towards what the ultimate resolution is. Because part of arbitration is typically there's a winner and a loser. So, we monitor those as they come in, and we have everyone on record. So I'd be happy to find out that very specific information. I can go back to 2003 and we have it all in a very large spreadsheet.
Okay, I don't see any further questions.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Morning, George Livert with the Nevada State Contractors Board. Dave asked me just to come up and have a few words regarding our relationship with them. And our relationship probably starts out with the comment that I've heard 100 times over the years I've been with the Contractors Board. When something comes up, I go to the executive officer and say, we've got this particular issue. And the comment I've heard over 100 times is, what's California do? Okay. We are not bashful. We will steal anything of your practices, procedures, policies. That's where we're going to go. That's where we're going to look, and we're going to steal it. We'll walk out here today. We'll take copies of whatever we need. We'll take California off, put Nevada on, then it's ours. One of the things that we do with this cooperation is, if we revoke a contractor's license in Nevada and we know he's got a California license, we send you copies of those decisions and orders so you can take action there. We get the same thing in here. So we try to work that particular way. Joint investigations, the guys love doing it. We can't talk numbers because you're so big and we're so small. But the practices and the procedures are good. The investigators enjoy working with your people. They see it a little bit different. With one investigator in Reno, that his idea of a sting is he gets an empty house and starts calling up people, they show up. So we have a one-man sting that is going on all the time. Other times are the major ones where we work in cooperation and go there. The cooperation is such that, and probably the best example, a couple weeks ago, we had an applicant come in. He gave us a trade certification from, I believe it was from Department of Industrial Relations. And when I looked at it, the fonts on the letterhead were different, and it just looked sloppy. So rather than initiate an investigation on background, whatnot like that, I sent an email to Dave. Dave, here's what I got. It looks bad. Can you help me with anything? Within an hour, I got an email response back that it was a valid certificate. You know, you can't get those responses out of other states. You know, it's the relationship that you've got there. I can do an email, I can do a phone. Dave does the same thing back and forth. That's what helps a lot, and that's what gets things working. We've jumped onto your training, sent some guys up to Sacramento. I've got other guys waiting to go to L.A. We'll get in there, and the training is very good, it's my understanding. The guys raved about it. So we'll be jumping on that one with you. The one thing that we have that you don't have is a residential recovery fund in Nevada. Right now, we've got about $5 million in the kitty for that. This year, we're paying out about, we'll end up paying out about $500,000. We're down about 50% of what it was the other years. We were over $1 million. So the claims are less, we're paying out less, but it is a very viable program. We get into the forms that we steal. We've stolen your background investigation forms, your background disclosure forms. Contractors in Nevada are the same as contractors in California. They don't understand the forms. They can't read. They can build a house, but they can't read a form. So we've gone into some extensive rewrites of our forms, and our board was heavily involved in the wording of this. They were getting frustrated with the answers they were getting in there. And as I've told the board members, I can't wait till the first applicant comes forward who signed the new forms and have him explain to the board why he can't understand it. We're bold print, we're red, we're scripted, we're everything you can imagine, but I guarantee you they won't understand it. No one explained it. They signed it blank. No one told them. But there again, our applicants are just like yours. None of them remember a DUI. None of them remember a spousal battery charge. We have a lot, not a lot, but we have enough contractors that you have rejected in California. And guess where they show up looking for a license? Out with us. Now, I don't understand why you would reject somebody that's an L.A. gangbanger that was in jail for drive-by shootings. I don't know why you've rejected them. I know why we're going to reject them, just for that particular reason. But we see them coming. If it's happening in California, it's coming to Nevada. Your applicants are being rejected there, are coming over here. Sex offenders come over through the background investigations and fingerprinting that we started about a year and a half ago. We're getting unregistered sex offenders that have been in our state for years that we're finding. Now, most of the time, you get the serious offense, they withdraw their application. Two in particular, I'm thinking of, I convinced them to leave the state of Nevada. Their options were kind of limited at that point in time. So we look at the different things. Recently, we had an individual that we've been looking for him for about 2 years. And he was using a 702 phone number, cell phone. He was using the internet. His father lived in Las Vegas. We'd talked to him on the phone. We couldn't get him to show up. We had multiple warrants out for him. Guess where he was? California. And we eventually found him in California. We got the Fugitive Task Force to get him by coming down there. But with today's technology, you have no idea where someone is. And finding him and tracking him down requires a cooperation of everyone involved. So, I can summarize it with we've got a good relationship, in my opinion. You guys have some tremendous practices, procedures. We sit in awe at what we see that you can accomplish, and we try to do it our way, a little bit like your way, do it our way. But I think it's working out. Any questions I can throw?
Well, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you and the Nevada board. We feel the same way about you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, but before we go on to agenda item H, I'd just like to recognize that past California Contractor State License Board Ed Barnes walked in the room. For those of you who know Ed. Yeah, he's got his tan on and his shorts on and his smile on his face, so things must be good on the podiatry board with Ed. No, Ed keeps coming back. Ed's involved, and he's always doing good for us, so I appreciate you coming by, Ed. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and move on to Agenda Item H, Public Affairs Committee Report. Rick Lopes and Joan Hancock will give us the Public Affairs Committee Report. Rick and Joe?
I'll go ahead and start quickly introducing the other members of the committee, Pastor Herrera on that side of the U here, and Bob Brown, and on my side, Ed Lang, and absent member is Louise Kirkbride. I'm going to go ahead and go first, Rick. Since our colleagues from Nevada Board are here, the committee would like very much to tell you how much the public affairs staff appreciates the hard work of your public affairs staff, and especially the work that's being done right now by Rania and Jennifer, who I can see your head over there, but why don't you just stand up and be recognized? Thank you. Over the past years, our staffs have worked together and on a number of projects, including preparation of an outreach guide for reaching seniors, as well as outreach after a disaster. Both of these projects for the National Association of State Contractors Licensing Agencies, or NASCLA, are now available to other states throughout the nation. Last month, our two offices worked together to issue a joint press release after the second annual Border Blitz sting operation, and I think you heard a little bit about that from Dave Foe. Right now, they're working together with the Oregon and Arizona boards and NASCLA on a major outreach effort that will be unfolding in a couple of weeks, and Rick will tell you a little bit about that. The Public Affairs Committee wants both boards to know how valuable this relationship is, and we look forward to projects we will work together on in the months ahead. Lastly, I just want to express my thanks to our outgoing members, Bob Brown and Louise Kirkbride. Your guidance, and you've heard a lot about him, Bob, that is, through Bob, and also Louise, and the efforts that they've made in our board and how deeply we appreciate you, and we're going to miss you. So, thank you so much. You're on, Rick.
Thanks, John. I wanted to echo that as well. Both Bob and Louise came onto the board within my first few months, and so they've been supportive, and I feel like I'm sending my kids away to college or something. They're going away, but their support has been great, and I wanted to note that as well. We're going to quite quickly go through some of our highlights, and I did want to echo what John said as well about our working relationship with Jennifer and Rania and the Nevada board. It's been a great back and forth with us. Since we do have a larger staff, we've been able to serve as a resource for them, and are happy always to receive emails or phone calls from both Jennifer and Rania, and there are opportunities and times too, and we'll pick up the phone and call, and it's kind of really let us, I don't want to get into too much depth about what will be happening in a couple of weeks, but being able to lean back on the Nevada board as well as the Oregon and the Arizona board is something that has really been reassuring to us as we're trying to build and expand the things that we can do as far as outreach. And so this thing that's going to be happening in a couple of weeks, we've already had conference calls and we've got everybody on board, and just the coordination we've seen so far, not only in the public affairs side, but I know that Dave and his team on the enforcement side as well. So keep your eyes and ears glued to your local media outlets in a couple of weeks. Hopefully you'll be hearing some big news coming from us. On page one, I did want to note, especially for our friends from Nevada, I know you do a lot of social media, but we do have social media that we're doing here between our Twitter, our Facebook, and our YouTube pages. So you'll see at the top of page 2, we do track the likes and follows that we have as we slowly grow our social media outreach. We do have an email alert feature where we have people that can sign up to subscribe to different newsletters, press releases, different email alerts. As you can see there on page 2, we've got about 16,500 subscriptions. We've also got a database of about 79,000 email addresses of our licensees. So our total database that we can hit by email, while 93,000 does sound like a lot, we do have over 300,000 licensees. So it's just a fraction of what the ways that we're able to outreach to our licensees. But you can see on the top of page 3 how the list has pretty steadily grown since we launched it back in 2010. On pages 3 and 4, I won't go through all of them, but we've listed at least through the end of April the various press releases that we've issued. As Joe noted on page 4, we did do the joint press release on May 18th with the Nevada board after that operation, which went very well. I know that Jennifer will get a little more talking about the NASCLA outreach stuff that we assisted with in the elder area as well as the disaster, and I'll let Jennifer will be able to cover that. But we worked closely together with both NASCLA and the Nevada board, which I think we had some very successful and productive meetings with them as well. On the top of page 5, I did want to note for the board that the California Licensed Contractor newsletter, a couple of years ago, because of our budget situation, we had gone to an online only in the hopes that our email list would grow fast enough and we would get people to subscribe. Since that hasn't been the case, we've gone to a position now where we're going to be, our plan is to issue one printed newsletter per year in order that we can, the mandatory and the important things that we can communicate to our industry, we aren't going to solely rely on them being able to hit them with emails, because we're finding that our list just hasn't grown to the spot we'd like it. So we are in production right now. We expect to have a printed newsletter. If not in early July, it actually might make it out by the end of this month. We're going through our final approvals, and it should be going to the printer soon. We are now moving into doing instructional videos. It's one of the areas that we find, as George was talking about, how people don't read forms. The first video that we're going to be doing is going to be helping our applicants actually fill out an application, and maybe it's a sign of bureaucracy. We were hoping to produce maybe a 5 or 6 minute video. I think right now we're trying to cut it down from 25 minutes on taking them through step by step through our application. So we're very near being finished with this, and we're going to have that up on our YouTube page as soon as it's done. We'll hopefully be able to give assistance to the people filling out the applications. We work closely with our licensing division to take a look at the areas on our applications where we see the biggest problems, the biggest mistakes made, and a lot of the videos do focus on those areas. So we're anxious to see in the weeks and months after the video is released if we actually see some improvement and less mistakes made on the applications themselves. As we're talking about video too, I did want to note that if you haven't noticed the camera in the room, we are doing a live web stream. And those are being made available at our board meetings. I think this is the 3rd or 4th meeting we've had with the live streams. On page 6, we go into some of our community outreach highlights, the biggest, of course, being our senior scam stoppers. I did want to note for our board and for the Nevada board as well, is even with some travel restrictions that have been put in place, we've gotten good support and approval of travel exemptions from our department. So we've been able to actually conduct more Scam Stopper seminars so far this year than we conducted in all of 2011. And you can see the list on pages 6 and 7 that go through the different seminars that we did. I also did want to note our employee wellness program does continue. The most popular things we do is our free farmers market, where we actually have a crop exchange. We have people bring in things, take things, and so we kind of it's a very popular thing for our employees. We've got the support, and it's run by a retired annuitant who works in my office. We also, a very successful thing was our retirement seminars. CalPERS is the agency that oversees all of our retirement plans, and they came in, and it was very well-attended training seminars that we did for our employees to help them understand as we all count down towards our retirement. Some of our counts are longer than others. I'm not going to go through them, but after that you'll see just a sample of some of the media coverage that we've gotten since the last meeting. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions, but that is the public affairs update.
What? There's one in Chinese or something.
You're not going to ask me to read that, are you?
No, I'm just,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about it. Is it like a...
Yeah, that was done based on a press release that we put out. You can see we translated just the title of it, and about 18 contractors arrested. So it was as a result of one of our press releases that was issued. And you can see there's a couple spots in there where you can see our name translated as for Mina Stromberg is somebody on my staff, and you see a couple of the numbers. But I'm sorry, I can't give you a better translation.
Some kind of worldwide certified publication and they're
No,
picking
this
you
is,
up, or-
you see, this is a Chinese newspaper. I believe they're based in Los
Oh,
Angeles.
it's like okay.
Yeah. And it's not usual, whenever we do sting operations, especially in Southern California, if we have a press event, there's a very big Korean media in the LA area where we often work with the Korean media here. They're very interested in things, so we have a lot of multilingual media out there.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
That concludes our report,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Great. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. We can do the Nevada do that presentation now or no? Oh, okay. We'll go ahead and move to agenda item I, Legislative Committee report. Mark Thurman will provide the report to the Legislative Committee. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all of our colleagues from Nevada who are here on our primary election day. So I welcome you on this august occasion. Our Chief of Legislation, Laura Zuniga, is not here today. She's still in Sacramento. So I'll be brief in my remarks. There were 3 items, I believe, that we handed out that, in addition to what's in your board packet. The first is a list of the bills that we are tracking with a little more information as to their status and disposition than what was in your handout or in your board book. Just in general, with this being an election year and a lot of things going on in Sacramento with regard to economy and elections and the budget woes and so forth, there hasn't been a lot of movement on a lot of the bills that we looked at back in April. But I would like to call your attention to 2 in particular that we don't have addressed in a handout per se, but they were bills that we did discuss a little bit in our prior meeting. One was AB 1655 by Dickinson, which was a Public Employee Bill of Rights. The other was the AB 2482, which was by Ma for the registered interior decorators. Both of those bills are now dead and no longer moving through the process. Additionally, in this morning's handouts, you'll find AB 1794, which has been amended and is continuing to move. According to my notes, it has moved from the Assembly and had its first reading in the Senate last Thursday, and that one we continue to have a support position on, and I don't believe we need any action on that item. The other item that I'd like to call your attention to is in this morning's handout was SB 1185. The handout supersedes the one that's in your book. This, too, has been amended. Actually, it was amended since the copy was put in the book. And it's changed the status of the Department of Consumer Affairs from being one of the bound members of this agent or this group that was being formed to now being an advisory capacity. So that takes a little bit of our concern away, as I understand it, for what this may have implicated for our board. Also, a couple of the other amendments pretty much removed all the opposition to this, which primarily had come from the Professional Association of Specialty Contractors. So, as you'll note, this has a staff recommendation for a watch, and I would move that our board adopt a watch position on this bill, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so I'm clear, this is on SB 1185?
On SB 1185, that we adopt a watch position on this.
Okay, there's a motion to approve a watch position. Is there a second? Second. Okay, there's a motion and a second for the California Contractors State License Board to adopt a watch position on SB 1185. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing no discussion, we'll move to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. Two other items I might speak to briefly. As we discussed in our strategic planning meeting in Monterey, the legislative staff is going to be looking at collecting and developing a database of information from the board members in particular with respect to contacts and other information that we might have that could be used as part of our legislative program in the coming year. The other thing that I wanted to alert everybody to, and we've already touched on it this morning, is that in August, Chief Zuniga is going to be sending out a request for legislative proposals to the board members and also to the senior staff, and I think we've already heard 2 or 3 potential legislative proposals that we may discuss here this morning, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that that would be coming here in the next couple of months. And that's in preparation for the 2013 legislative session. So with that, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions, that would conclude my report.
Okay, seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and move on the agenda to agenda item J, Licensing Committee Report. Licensing Chair David Diaz and Karen Ollinger will give us the License Committee report. Dave? Karen?
The licensing committee, is that working? Okay. It hasn't met since the last board meeting. The chief of licensing, there, no, I can hear it actually. Karen Ollinger will now give the licensing and testing program report.
Thank you. Okay, the licensing program update is under J1. If you'll turn to pages 1 and 2, we have the stats on the number of applications that we receive by month. We have it broken down quarterly. Page 2, we have the total numbers received per month. And as you'll see from all the charts, the numbers continue to decline. We are still seeing fewer applications come in. We did, if you look on the last chart on page 2, we did experience a little spike in March and April, and that's historically exactly how it always is. So they went up slightly, but we will expect them to kind of come back down and level off. On page 3 and 4 is information regarding the limited liability company program. As you know, we implemented that program at the beginning of the year. Since that time, we've begun tracking the number of applications that we've received. The chart on page 3 shows the total numbers of applications received, and it's broken down by whether they're an exam app or a waiver app. On page 4, we have a chart showing the various stages of processing, and as you'll see, we continue to have a high number of rejected applications. So for your information, we've listed the 5 most common reasons for the rejection of the applications. Hopefully this will improve too over time as applicants become more familiar with what's going to be needed to have their application processed. Page 5 is just the overall disposition of all applications by fiscal year, where they're at in the process, whether they've been issued, voided, or if they're still pending. And at the bottom of page 5, we speak about the licensing processing time periods, and there are charts at the end of the report on pages 15 through 17 that breaks it down by the type of application and how long it's taking for us to pull them for processing. Little overview of the application processing route just for informational purposes. And then starting on page 7 are the stats for the fingerprinting background unit with the total number of reports that we've received from the Department of Justice since we implemented that program. You can see it's just about 258,000. And then what has happened as a result of those reports, whether we got a criminal history hit, whether we denied the app, how many appeals, and how many probationary licenses we've issued as a result of fingerprinting. Pages 8, 9, and 10 is the information on our licensing information center, and as you're all aware, That center has really been struggling, mostly because of staffing issues. We are making some progress, though. We've hired a couple of permanent staff. We've hired a couple of retired annuitants to help out during peak work or peak call times. And we have, and hopefully we've gotten them all approved by now, 5 new students that will also help with the workload in there. So we're making progress slowly but surely. Also, we're doing increased training for all of our staff. There were a couple of really good webinars that most of the staff was able to take part in on customer assistance and, maintaining positive attitudes when you have not so positive people calling you on the phone. So we're trying to take advantage more of the online type training. Our quick tip program, I've spoken about that before. Every day a quick tip comes out and it'll cover just a variety of subjects, whatever the analyst picks for that day, but it covers all kinds of things that go on at the board, both on licensing side and enforcement. So it's been really helpful. The new call center processing email is something new that was set up to assist callers who are in dire situations. They didn't turn the renewal in, they're going to expire tomorrow. We're able to deal with a lot of this through email now. Also, when our workers' comp unit was really backlogged, it was creating a real problem for a lot of licensees. They were about to be suspended. So they were able to work with the call center staff and email over their certificate. The staff was then able to process it right away. So it's just a service we provide to those in desperate need. The licensing information center stats are on page 10. Then following that are the statistics for the judgment unit. As you know, we handle the assisting in the collection of all outstanding liabilities, judgments, and bond payment of claims. If licensees don't pay these outstanding liabilities, we will suspend their license. So we've been pretty successful, as you can see, by the amounts of helping or assisting to collect that money on behalf of the public, or whether it's owed franchise tax or EDD. And let's see, I've already mentioned the processing times. Those are just the charts. Excuse me. So moving on to the testing division update. Since Heidi's not here, I'll go ahead and give that. The testing division has a total of 3 vacant positions. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you had a question. And that's stated right up there at the beginning on staffing. The examination wait time is 3 weeks statewide, as well as applicants have an excellent chance of finding an available seat at any testing center on any day. Down at the bottom of page 1, there's a description of the examination development that is conducted by the testing unit. And then over on page 2, you can see those examinations, the new exams that are now in progress, as well as the classifications where an occupational analysis is being conducted at this time. The use of the testing center on other projects. The testing centers have been used for the administration of our enforcement rep examination. So that's in addition to the testing that we do for licensing. And then the ongoing consumer satisfaction survey, there's just a brief description of it there. And that's it for testing. So unless there's any questions on licensing or testing, that's the end of my report.
Just a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Joe.
Is there any reason why we can't continue to do the email transfer of workers' comp forms or whatever, so it's not, does it impact staff or staff time?
Well, right now, the email process I was talking about is kind of an emergency thing. It does impact staff. We're hoping to expand it to other areas, but right now we don't have a lot of those resources. Currently, and hopefully this isn't going to change, state fund sends over by electronic transfer all of the workers' comp policies. So, and we like that because then nobody has to process anything. It just automatically uploads right into our system. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. We can't do it right now, but
Yeah, and
state fund is the majority
of workers' comp policies, yes.
John?
Examinations in progress, the C46 solar. Do you draw from subject matter experts who encompass the electrical industry? And I'm asking like C10 licensed contractors, C46s, and others involved in that industry. How do you draw?
I believe, and this is really Heidi's area, the subject matter experts come from only the classification which is that the exam's being developed. So if it's a C46, it's going to come from C46s. It'll start out with the occupational analysis. See the list on the other side, where the industry itself, that particular industry, is surveyed, and that's how they start coming up with the areas that or test questions are going to have to be written. But I do believe it is limited just to that classification. But I can check with Heidi and make sure that I'm correct there.
Because of the complex nature of some of these installations, I think the C10 contractors should also have input, given the fact that we're moving in many cases away from a single install on a rooftop of a residential setting into a much more involved install. So I think that has to be discussed.
There are specific testing standards that have to be adhered to legally when developing an exam, and I think Heidi, is probably in a better position to fully explain that.
Thank you.
Pastor?
Yeah, this is a question that surfaced last night at dinner. What happens to the status of a license when a contractor goes bankrupt?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
We don't revoke the license for, just going bankrupt. Now, a contractor may have outstanding liabilities, and if those liabilities are discharged in bankruptcy, we remove the suspend for that. If they're not, then the license would get suspended for, the judgment or the outstanding liability.
Does
But
that information go on the website, or information on that person's license?
Yes, it goes on the website. In fact, I believe as soon as we send out the notice saying you're going to get suspended, I think that goes up. The license may be suspended at a later date. And then once it's suspended, we suspend it.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Karen.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item K, Executive Committee Report. The Administration Information Technology Update. Cindy Christensen, Assistant Registrar, will provide the update. Cindy?
On a few things. The staffing right now, we have 52.5 vacancies, and that will be changing. A budget letter was directing CSLB and all other state agencies to reduce their workforce by 5%. So we'll be losing an additional 21.5 vacancies. Those positions will be coming approximately, they'll be mainly from enforcement and licensing because that's where the majority of our staff is. So we're looking at that. A few of them will be coming from IT, and then a couple will also be coming from administration. Also want to update you on the CPS report, which is Cooperative Personnel Services. We asked them to do a study regarding whether or not we needed to get David, a deputy chief, that would be in between himself and the enforcement supervisors too, to assist him. We also asked them to look at whether the CSR classification was appropriate, and also look at the pay range for enforcement representatives. As far as the chief deputy for David, they indicated that they did not see a need for that just because of the geographic location. What they did find is that his span of control is pretty big. He's got a lot of retired annuitants that report directly to him. So what we are looking at is possibly reclassifying another position to an enforcement supervisor too, to assist him in overseeing that workload. As far as the classification of our CSRs, they had been advised earlier that maybe they could be staff service analysts, which is a little bit increase of a pay. However, they found out due to desk audits where they actually physically sat down with the consumer service representatives, they found that they are in the appropriate classification. And then the pay range for our enforcement representatives and enforcement supervisors, they also determined that that was the appropriate pay range. So we'll be, once that report is completed, we have a few little revisions on that. I'm sure we'll be sending you a copy of it if you'd like that. Also, we're working on, you may have read in the newspapers that there may be a 4-day work week coming up, where the governor has suggested that we work 38 hours, 9.5-hour days. So we've been asked by the director to look at how that will impact our operations. Like, for instance, are we giving exams on Fridays? Are there board meetings on Fridays? What are those impacts? And, can we rearrange the schedule at this point? So nothing's firm yet. I understand they're still in negotiations, but we do need to be ready for that should that hit our offices. On the next page, our business services update. Just want to draw your attention to our Fresno site. We have 2 locations there where we have our IC and another location with Swift. We had newer facilities where we placed our IC staff, and it now looks, just because of our staff reductions, that we have enough space that we can, once we reconfigure the newer space, we can move our Swift staff into that. The current location that our Swift staff is at is very unsafe, and I think it'll be a positive move for everybody. And we're also looking at potentially relocating our Oakland staff to San Francisco. And let's see, I think there was one, vehicles. We just surveyed 15 vehicles just because they're so old, and we put in a purchase request to replace 10 of those vehicles. And just to give you an example of how difficult it is for our staff out there in the field, I mean, I don't know about you, but if one of my tires goes or something like that, or you look at the front tires and they happen to be kind of looking like they're getting low, I either get 2 tires, or in my case, I have a 4-wheel drive. I have to get 4 wheels. They have to go, I guess every time they say there's 2 tires that are bad, they will only let them, or if a tire blows out, they only let them repair 1 tire, buy 1 tire at a time. So I, have to give a lot of credit to our staff that are out there driving every day for us. Moving on to the information technology, the biggest project we have right now is Breeze. We have several staff dedicated to that. Our IT staff, we have a couple of people working on that all the time, which really helps us because we're in phase 3, but they're catching a lot of things right now. Right now they're looking at data conversion, which those of you that have been through a process like that, that's probably the thing that can trip you up the most. It is progressing pretty smoothly. And we also have a couple of our staff that are working full-time there, just troubleshooting things. Not really going to go into the CES mail, workers' compensation. Move right straight into the budget update. As you can see right now, this is through April of 2012. If everything goes the way that we're projecting it, we stand to have either probably approximate $4 to $5 million reserve that'll be left over, and that money will be moved into our fund so that, it's just there that we can use that later. Our revenue is up approximately 11% from last year, and that's mainly due to the fact that we had the fee increase. As Karen reported earlier, our applications are down, but at least we do have that. On page 2, we have our license fund status. That's through fiscal year 2013-14, and we're still in the positive. But if we keep reverting money, that 1.9 months in reserve should increase. Our construction management education account, that we just dispersed some awards. So our fund, we have about 27% left. And the fund condition looks like we'll go into the red next year. Also want to report that we are working on a budget change proposal. It's our annual budget change proposal where we ask for additional staff in our subsequent arrest unit. We're either looking at redirecting staff because we do have a high number of vacancies. Asking for additional staff has usually been rejected. That's been rejected for the past, 3 or 4 years, Steve? 5 or 6? Yes, we have a good track record. But anyway, we're going for that again. And then finally, there's the statistics summary for your review. And unless there's any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Steve. All right. Thanks.
Okay, we had a strategic planning session at our last board meeting. Staff took the comments from the facilitator and the board members and have a draft strategic plan for you. One of the highlights is on page 8, where David got direction from the board on the priorities for proactive enforcement given our limited resources. Staff knows now which are the highest priorities and can direct the workload appropriately. If there are no other questions, it would be appropriate to have a motion to approve the plan. I would add that we are going to be talking about the strategic planning process with the Nevada board, learning how they do it, and we'll be explaining to them how we've conducted our strategic planning sessions to see if we can come up with some new ideas.
Is there a motion for approval?
Move to accept. Second.
There's a motion. There's a motion and a second to approve the 2012-2013 strategic plan. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And finally, we have a week set aside for our board meetings through next fiscal year. I think right now the most difficult one to pin down is going to be the December one. We're also getting instructions from the administration. We may be restricted on where we hold future board meetings. We'll keep you informed on that. When we get back to the office, we'll be sending out emails to all the board members to try and pick certain dates for these board meetings that are listed in the tentative schedule.
Okay, are there any questions on what Steve's just reported? Okay, seeing no questions, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item L4, election of board officers. And the nomination committee consisted of Jim Miller and Matt Kelly. Since board member Kelly is not in attendance, board member Miller, would you please do your duty?
Yes, Chair Lamb. Yes, Matt Kelly and I met and discussed the list of candidates, or I should say volunteers, and we'd like to make the following recommendations. That Paul Schiavino is chair, Joan Hancock is vice chair, and Mark Thurman is secretary. So not hearing any other nominations from the floor, that's our recommendation.
Okay, are there any further nominations?
Move that nominations be closed.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor and a second to close nominations and railroad those 3 individuals. On the question of closing the nominations, is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Nominations are closed, and the railroad has run you over. Paul, congratulations.
Thank you, Bob. I had the privilege of saying a few words, if I could, about our chairman that's leaving, who followed in some difficult footsteps after Lisa and Eddie, and in the past, Jim as well, I understand. And Bob was an easy one to talk about, to be honest. You just have to pick some words as a leader of what he brought to the board. Brought caring, cares about the consumers, cares about our mandate. Brought calm in light of a wicked market, declining applicants. Had to be part of the process of trying to increase our fees so that we could fund our agency. I looked up a couple statistics that were just hard to look at when you realize how much of a hit we've taken in construction. That in 2008, approximately 1 million people in California were employed in the construction industry. The latest census was half that, 50% unemployment rate in construction. So during this time, Bob did his job. He supported the CSLB managers that moved on to the DCA, helped them in that process. He focused on the issues at hand in our meetings. So he always kept us on topic when we as board members had a tendency to drift. His pace in the meetings, he kept us moving so we could all get out of here at a reasonable hour. Talked faster than anybody I know. He's also a realist, and I'll be the first one to volunteer. I tend to be an idealist every now and then, and I drift off into, wouldn't it be great if? And Bob would always bring us back to, what's our mandate? What are we here for? And let's quit drifting so we can stay on topic. Now, as a legacy, which is kind of an interesting way to look at somebody who's a leader, is what you leave for everybody else, Bob, and what you left for me. First time I met Bob on a one-on-one setting, we were at Norwalk, and we were with Dave Folk. We go in to meet with the enforcement staff, and it's pre a board meeting, and we all sit down in the room, and the goal is to get staff to talk, get staff to communicate. First thing Bob did, he says, Dave, get out. Tossed him right out. And he said, this is about us and about staff. And what Bob was doing was, if you look at how the board's set up, it's the board, and then a registrar, and then managers, and then staff. And we live in a world of a hierarchy. Whether it's a business or the government, it's a hierarchy. Bob just turned it on its head, and he said, nope, I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to work with the staff, and I'm going to get some input, and I'm going to bring that back up through the system and try and change how the system works from the bottom up. And I think it was a hugely valuable lesson to me, maybe to all of us, on where the value is to the Contractor State Licensing Board. It's in the staff. And we're only as good as we help them. So, Bob, for one, thank you for all you did this year.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Okay, well, in keeping with my reputation, let's move on to agenda item. Let's see. M. No. I am just a cog in the wheel. I'm a helper helping the people of California have a better life going forward, and that is the truth. And I think everyone on this board feels the same way, and I'm proud to be part of it. So we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item M, which I've been looking forward to all day, discussion with the Nevada State Contractors License Board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the first item on our agenda, Ms. Green, you're going to lead us through the NASCLA Resources Committee report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Burt. As most of you know, and as Joan mentioned, California and Nevada are both very active in NASCLA. A couple of years ago, we created a new committee called the Resource Committee, and Steve Sands also serves on that with me. We have a little presentation we're going to give that gives an overview of what we've accomplished with that committee and the two programs that we recently launched. And I'll turn it over to Jennifer Turner.
We'll all have to move.
There we go. I apologize in advance. I'm going to have to sit at this chair as I have a couple internet videos that I'd like to show, but let me get this going. So as Marky mentioned, the Resources Committee was established last year to further the mission of NASCLA by essentially providing all members of NASCLA a clearinghouse of information, someplace that they could go where they could exchange information, learn new ideas, and build new customized programs. And part of our mission with the Resources Committee is to expand resources and enhance the knowledge, performance, and productivity of our boards. As you can see, our first priority was centered on preventing elder abuse. The national data continues to show an increase from year to year in the number of elder abuse cases being reported as indicated up on the slide. While this trend appears to be slowing as time progresses, it's certainly not unlikely that we'll see this number increase as baby boomers continue to age. As you know, cases of financial abuse or exploitation are often what we most encounter during our investigations as contractor boards. Raising concerns on this matter is national data which demonstrates there are approximately 5 million financial abuse cases, financial abuse victims each year, and only 1 in 25 of these cases is being reported. What's even more alarming is that for every case that does get reported, experts indicate that there are 5 that go unreported. And what I'd like to show you is I know California has quite a few clips on elder abuse, and this is one that we recently had in Nevada that I'd like to run.
If you're looking to make some home improvements or repairs, you may want to listen up.
Yeah, one of the most common ways to get ripped off these days is with contractor scams. So Michelle Mortensen has some important information to share with you before you hire anyone to work on your home. And sometimes we think we won't get scammed, but then
we do.
We forget something, and yeah.
It happens all the time, sadly. Just in Nevada last year, at least 4,300 seniors were ripped off by contractors. But that number doesn't even come close to the total. So how can you protect yourself? Well, first, choose the right contractor. That means anyone who's licensed. Because if something does go wrong, you've got time for recourse.
You have up to 4 years to file a complaint with the board should the workmanship issues arise down the road.
And problems do arise. Renee Evers needed her roof repaired in 2007. She hired a contractor who wasn't licensed, and she had a host of problems.
He came, he helped a half a day, and I never saw them again. They disappeared.
3 years and $9 grand later, Renee's leaky roof was fixed, but a whole bunch of other problems were created by the long delay. She wishes she had used a licensed contractor, as well as following other tips she later learned from the Nevada State Contractors Board. And you can actually learn more of those tips for free tomorrow. The Nevada State Contractor Board is hosting a free seminar offering tips and tricks to keep you from becoming a victim. It starts at 9:30 in North Las Vegas at the Martin Luther King Senior Center. Now, Renee's case, really not that unusual at all. They say nationwide, for every one case that's reported, there's actually 5 that went unreported.
Wow, unbelievable. Yeah, and you were saying like it's not just seniors either.
No, it really is. It can
Everyone.
happen to anyone because if they're unlicensed, oftentimes they'll give you the best deal. Cheaper isn't always better in these cases.
I know, but we all like cheaper, don't we?
We do like cheap.
The orthodontic clinic at Roseman University of Health Science. Sorry for that, just 1 second. Okay, so developing a customized program. The Elder Abuse Awareness Program is structured into 3 main areas and allows states to review the best practices and toolkit information to customize strategies and approaches that meet their immediate needs. The first component will help boards understand their role, how to identify elder abuse, and offer examples and curriculum for staff trainings specific to working with the elderly population. The Outreach and Engagement section offers resources for messaging tactics, effective communication with various audiences, and recommendations for utilizing media to help educate the public and tell the board's story. Partnering is the last component and probably one of the most vital because it can help strengthen a board's enforcement and outreach efforts by reaching audiences the board may not have access to and expanding resources that the board may have limitations with. The information online will help boards understand how they can enhance relationships with legislators to better meet their goals and how senior centers and community organizations can be utilized and engaged as effective partners. Each section includes a toolkit offering resources such as sample brochures, ideas for bulletins and newsletters, save the date flyers or posters, public service announcements, and much, much more. In Nevada, we have taken an active role to establish our own customized program which targets every legislative district throughout the state in the coming year. One highlight of our program is a recently completed public service announcement that was narrated by our governor, which I'd like to show you.
Hi, I'm Governor Brian Sandoval with an important message for Nevada seniors. When having work done on your home, it's important to beware of unlicensed and unscrupulous contractors. These contractors target seniors using high-pressure sales tactics and other unethical business practices. The Nevada State Contractors Board is here to help you. To find out how you can protect yourself or to check a contractor's license, visit nscb.nv.gov or call 702-486-1100.
And I'm pleased to note that we launched our first senior awareness program this last May. I guess we're in June, so that's correct. In May, we had over 100 seniors in attendance, or close to. Got very positive feedback. We partnered, like I said, with the state senator, and we had 4 state agency representatives who came in and spoke about different types of elder abuse. We wanted to expand our program so that it didn't just focus on contracting scams, but also talked about us as a community coming together to address this very serious issue for our population. And here's just a quick recap of what our program entailed.
Tricia Keene joins us now, and you really hate to hear about older folks getting taken advantage of. Unfortunately, it happens more often than we'd like to think. And we help a lot here at Channel 13 as well with our call for action. We begin tonight with a consumer alert. Seniors are often targeted by scammers. So in an effort to crack down on senior fraud, the Nevada State Contractors Board, in collaboration with representatives from the legislature and state departments, launched its first senior awareness program at the MLK Senior Center. Officials say between July 2010 and June of 2011, over 4,000 elderly abuse cases were reported to the Nevada Health and Human Services Aging and Disability Services Division.
There's all kinds of fraudsters out there who are targeting seniors, and the goal of this was not just to highlight contractor scams, but to make seniors aware of all the different types of con artists that are out there.
Organizers say seniors are most at risk for fraud because they tend to have more disposable income. They're more trusting and are often looking for ways to help provide for their families. Seniors here today say this meeting was eye-opening.
I'm just aware, and it's really kind of scary because, you know, I used to talk to a lot of people, but, you know, now I don't do it anymore because, you know, you just never know when they're going to scam you.
70% of all elderly abuse cases were reported right here in Clark County. Also,
so moving on, as you can see, we're very proud of that program, and we look to continue expanding that to the legislative districts throughout the state in the coming months. Our next priority issue for the Resources Committee was the disaster, the board's role during a disaster in helping states develop a disaster response plan. Much like the issue of elder abuse, disasters continue to be increasing over the years, as can be seen on the slide. The most common disasters experienced by states obviously are hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and fires. The disaster response plan includes 5 main components, starting with preparing for a disaster. This component focuses on defining the board's role, identifying the areas of importance to the board in developing their program, and creating opportunities to train staff so that they are prepared to respond and assist when a disaster strikes. The educational component is absolutely necessary. Strategies should include both proactive and reactive efforts. The website toolkit offers messaging tools and tactics and templates that can be used by states to customize to their individual needs. In times of disaster, it's also important the boards understand the chain of command, know how to work with and understand the meaning behind executive orders, and lastly, be familiar with any laws, policies, or regulation changes that may take effect after or during a disaster and how that would impact the board's capabilities and role. Enforcement efforts can be significantly impacted based on added penalties or enhanced laws during times of disasters, as you're well aware in California. The toolkit provides best practices for first response, conducting sweeps and stings in the affected areas, as well as providing examples of enhanced penalties and punishments by neighboring states. And lastly, we wanted to again emphasize the importance of partnering, which again allows you to share resources, get your message out to a wider audience, and especially in times of disaster, helps you to expedite and streamline your operations by working together. The toolkit includes strategies on how to identify key partners, tactics for opening the lines of communication, and tips on how to approach partnering from a give-and-take standpoint. Shortly after the committee developed these programs, Nevada was hit with 2 fires of our own in Northern California. As a result of our disaster response plan efforts, we were in the field immediately communicating with consumers, contractors, partnering agencies, law enforcement, and as a result, we have not had any unlicensed contractor issues in those areas. So we're very proud of that. Our investigators continue to monitor those areas as the spring hits and things are starting to get in a recovery mode. Here's a news clip that aired on the impacted regions highlighting our efforts and offering you an example of what opportunities are available in times of disaster. Sorry.
Take your home your way with accessories from RC Willey.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Investigators with the State Contractors Board are warning Collin Ranch area homeowners about contractor fraud.
Andrew Del Greco spoke with the board today to find out what they're doing to stop that fraud. Andrew.
Well, Shelby, the State Contractors Board says it is doing its best to prevent unlicensed contractors from targeting Collin neighborhoods. And some people might be surprised how proactive the board's investigators say they have been. And they say They are not stopping anytime soon. It's new at 11. One of the city's most destructive fires ever is over, but homeowners in the Collin area should not let their guards down when it comes to the threat of contractor fraud. In fact, the State Contractors Board's Deputy Director of Investigations, Gary Hoyt, says if unlicensed contractors are not already roaming these streets, they will soon.
I believe they will, yes.
Hoyt says a lot of the recent work in the Collin fire area has been cleanup, but soon he says the impacted homes will be ready for contract work. So we asked the Contractors Board what they're doing to stop unlicensed contractors from preying on people who are eager to get back in their homes.
We have an investigator up there 8 hours a day, driving the whole fire area.
Hoyt says his team is putting more presence in this area, which includes putting investigators on daily patrols who seek out illegal activity. Also, signs have been placed in these neighborhoods so people will beware of those going door to door offering to work on homes without the proper license.
My investigators will stop, talk to the people doing the work or attempting to do the work, maybe call back in here or look on their computer and make sure they're licensed.
So far, Hoyt says it appears no homeowners have fallen victim, but he says now is the time to remain vigilant.
So we're going to stay in that area daily until we feel that the danger of the unlicensed people have passed.
And so the board asks any homeowners to report if anyone approaches them to do work but who doesn't have or refuses to show proof of a license, because if you are unhappy with the work done by an unlicensed contractor, your only recourse to have the faulty work fixed is through the civil courts. Now back to you.
So throughout the Disaster Response Plan Toolkit, you'll find sample collateral materials, disaster plans, press releases, and consumer information such as those shown on the screen. And this is just a handful of what will be available, and our goal is to really encourage states, all states throughout NASCLA, to start posting their information. The majority of the material has come from California and Nevada to date, and we hope to continue to expand that. So just in closing, the Resources Toolkit developed by the committee was created with the intent to create a venue for states to begin sharing information, have an opportunity to discuss best practices and set those best practices, spark innovative ideas, help us to be more proactive in our operations, have a more unified and consistent messaging approach across the nation, better understand the board's role and the opportunities available to us, and last but not least, to help us achieve our mission to find new ways to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our consumers. And that concludes our presentation.
Some other state used the materials. Wasn't there like a East Coast thing or?
I think we tried to get, was it, which state had the issue? We were trying to see if they implemented their disaster response plan after the was it a hurricane?
Alabama.
Alabama. I'm not sure if we received feedback from them, but certainly I think that was after the fact of our plan being in place, so we hope that they utilize some of those.
Thank you. Were there any questions on the NASCLA information?
I just want to recognize Jennifer, Rick, and also Rick Vellucci, was a leading investigator who did elder abuse and worked in disaster recovery. Jennifer and Rick did a lot of work, and the whole country's going to benefit from their work. And we really did a tremendous service to NASCLA and fellow states. Sorry. Thank you, Bob.
Boy, if I'd have known I could blink the lights and get them to be quiet, I would have done that a year ago. Just kidding.
Aaron, make sure you lose his travel plan.
That's okay. I have a fax machine. I'll keep faxing it. Okay, before we move on to agenda item N, which is adjournment, I've been asked by the chair-elect to have the floor for a few minutes. So, Paul.
Because of our rules that we have here in California, the only opportunity that we have to address the entire board is at a board meeting. So this is my one chance before we begin next year. is to challenge all of us as board members. Everybody good?
Yep.
Everybody's awake? Is to challenge everybody as board members to do something a little bit different than I feel like we've done in the past, and that is to help set the agendas for the committee meetings. I think we've started this process in our strategy session. I think we're following up with what Laura's coming out with a list of legislative agenda items that the entire board's going to be able to take a look at. I've spoken to Steve about the staff perhaps giving us, as board members, a notice ahead of the meeting of a proposed agenda and giving us a chance to add to that agenda before it closes. And so, challenge to all of us this year is to add to that agenda, add your 2 cents worth. And the committee chairs that end up with those positions, please try and push that upon your chair, on the members of your committee, to add their 2 cents worth and to put items on the agenda. That's it in closing, and back to our chairman.
Okay, we'll go ahead and continue with the Nevada board. I kind of jumped the gun there, so my apologies.
One item we had on for discussion concerned our strategic plan. We've distributed copies of the Nevada plan to all of you. And Steve, did you want to comment on that as well?
Very nice,
Martin.
That wasn't set up.
I'm not sure what you mean. He's got his picture on here. What's up with that? Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, what we wanted to share with the Nevada board and get ideas from them is that how our strategic planning process has evolved over the years. When we first did strategic planning at the Contractors Board when I was registrar, we actually used Daniel Isofano from MIG, who I think is doing it now for the Nevada board. We then went through a few years where the board really wasn't that interested, and staff just drafted a plan, and the board approved it. Then we contracted with Daniel's firm and had a facilitator, Pat McLaughlin, who did it for 3 years. And basically, we followed the same structure I think that Daniel probably uses for Nevada. You do an environmental scan. You interview all the board members to see what the issues are. You develop mission statements, a vision for the board, all the things that are common to all our strategic plans. In California, the boards in the department have to have a strategic plan, and you can't ask for any budget items unless they're part of your strategic plan. So it is mandatory in California to have a plan. After going through this process with MIG and Pat McLaughlin, you know, I think I can speak for the board, it got a little stale. I mean, it was like, you know, it was becoming so formulaic. So last year we we hired a different firm, and what Steve Spar, the new facilitator, did, he would develop issue areas and break the board and senior staff up into equal groups, and they would all individually take an issue and vet it and then report back to the full board. I think we had four of those 2 years ago, but in that particular time we were focusing on creating the plan, coming up with specific objectives for the strategic plan. This last year, we took a much broader approach. Steve Spar, again, did the individual interviews, but he broke it up into 3 major areas which generated a lot of discussion and tangential issues and sidebars, if you will. And then the three big groups reported back to the full board, which generated more and more discussion. The actual development of objectives just kind of fell out. They didn't really just focus on that. And the thing I remember the board members liking most, both last year and this year, was just the ability just to talk and just to be able to share ideas without following a set agenda like we normally do at a board meeting. And the board liked it so much, we're proposing that the board do it twice a year, not to actually create a strategic plan twice a year, but to follow up on the original discussion to see where we are and have that opportunity, perhaps for a half a day or maybe a full day, generating more and more discussion. So that's kind of how it's evolved in California. I'd like to ask any other California board members if I missed anything or what your perception is before we hear from Nevada. Any?
Well, I wasn't actually at this year's meeting due to something else, but following up on that whole organic discussion, I mean, I think that's a little bit about what Paul's talking about, adding things to an agenda and stuff, because you go to these meetings and you follow a very, very strict agenda where pretty much you're going to discuss a canned set of reports in a book. And, you know, strategic planning should be an ongoing part of every agenda in some way, shape, or form. And there should be organic discussion followed by a little bit of conflict and maybe free ideas going back and forth. So, I mean, I actually think there should be some element of that in every meeting.
I was going to make a comment after you did your introduction, and that is this, that these committee meetings and coming to the committee with to help set the agenda. I mean, the idea there, I'm assuming, is to stay in line with what we have already agreed and decided through our strategic planning process. Is that what you were suggesting? Because I don't know how we can operate outside the bounds of that when that is why we're gathering together.
Steve and Cindy, you guys can chime in here. I'm sure you will. You know, the strategic planning session is just that. It's a planning session. The way I look at the committee meetings, the way they're set up right now, is there's a relatively defined agenda that staff comes up with that is absolutely based on our strategic plan. But the way I'm looking at the committee meetings is there may be something that's slightly outside the box, and there's no rule that says you can't put that on an agenda for a committee meeting. Not that I'm aware of. And so the strategic plan can be a living document. It can be moving as the year goes on. I'm not sure if we could change it dramatically. Cindy?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
board can vote to do anything it wants as long as it's legal. I mean, so if I might add, from what I'm hearing is you just want a more formalized method for allowing board members to help set committee agendas. I mean, we have in our rules, any board member can request any agenda item, 10 days prior to a committee meeting or board meeting. But maybe, the board members didn't realize that, or, so, this board is famous for trying things different. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll go on to the next thing. So I think we're going to work with Paul and the committee chairs and figure out how to get more input from board members before we set committee agendas, given the fact that staff will have to have enough time to develop materials. And of course, the agenda notices have to meet all the legal requirements, so we'd have to work with Dawn to make sure that everything noticed is legal. And I'd like to know what, before I forget this thought, I'd like to know how Nevada sets its, like, do you have a committee structure? How do you deal with coming with agenda items for committees and board meetings? I'd be interested to hear about that.
Sure, Steve. What I'll do is just to contrast, compare how we went through our strategic planning process. We hadn't done strategic planning because it's not mandated at the board. We haven't done it in 7-8 years, and we embarked on that about 3 years ago. So Our process is still fresh. We know that certainly has its life cycle. So we're fresh at it now. The first year, we believed we needed to do it organically, and we stumbled through that. And I think that struggle to do it on your own really was extremely valuable because people bought into the process as opposed to hire an outside consultant. They come in, facilitate a process. Maybe everyone's bought in. Maybe not everyone isn't bought into the process. So that helped us. That struggle was a good learning moment for everyone. And then we realized that a plan is only as good as you implement it. And so we did it organically, and then we brought in Daniel to help provide some framework and some focus on how we actually deploy that out and implement it. I think for us, the learning is that if a couple of 2-3 years from now we want to go back and try it on our own, I think that's a very good process, because I think what I hear you all saying is you have to debate well in the process. And if you lose the debate and having the real conversations as opposed to a glossy, pretty picture, you really lose the essence of really what you're trying to do. And I know that's not new and different, but I can see it get off track, and I can see how we may get kind of stale, and it gets very process oriented in terms of organic. So that's the process we try to run it like a business. When we come and have our strategic planning, Daniel does a lot of pre-interviews with us, but we come and we want to shake it up. And not that we're going to try to start a fire, but we do not want everyone just saying, yep, that's what we should do, because that's not getting us where we want to go. So candidly, 3 years ago, and I think I'll give a ton of credit for Jennifer and staff. Is I came over here 3 years ago and had lunch with you, and Lisa, and Rick was kind enough to tour us through your public affairs department, and we just were blown away. And we said, and that was part of our street, we are going to come, and we're going to come strong and come big. And today it's just a great way of us to show off what staff has been able to do, but ultimately it's about our consumers. So that was kind of a long-winded explanation. I'll certainly open it up to any of the other Nevada board members that have comments in the process that we followed.
Yeah, and I'll also add, when we embarked on this journey, the discussion was it wasn't going to be a one-shot deal. You do the plan, you put it on the shelf. I believe quarterly staff goes over each goal, time frames. We do some tweaking right then and there, because sometimes when you put something down on paper and you go towards that goal for, let's say, a quarter, maybe that's not the right direction, or maybe you found out something doesn't work, you need to readjust it. And if you don't revisit it at least once a quarter, then it's going to lose a lot of interest and a lot of focus. And you also have to show staff that you were genuinely interested in making sure we achieve our goals.
I think as a board member, the thing that I enjoy most about it is the fact that the board is it gives the board an opportunity to engage with staff, and it gives us an opportunity to really delve into some of the finer points, not to the point that we're micromanaging, but to the point that we understand some of the challenges that staff faces that we would have otherwise not known had we not enjoyed this process. So, that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about the process, and that it is a living, moving document. Whenever we're meeting about it, we have the opportunity to change it, to tweak it, to make it better.
Any other comments from Nevada or California on strategic planning? I think this session of section of the agenda, we really want to have an interactive session. We've got some other compelling topics here, but that's obviously this part of the time. So Bob will try to keep us on task, and maybe Paul and I will try to push us adrift in some of these topics that we're going to cover. Steve?
When you have your strategic planning session, how does your staff participate? What I think in California, when we sit, it's board member staff, and I think a fallout is the senior staff got to know the board members a lot better individually, and the board members got to know the staff a lot better, and it really improved not just communication, but made us more of a group, much tighter knit. Do you allow your senior staff, like Jennifer, to fully participate, or is it just the board members? Or?
And I'd certainly like staff to comment on this. One of the things when we started this 3 years ago, and it was important for the board, is when we come in that meeting at strategic planning, we are all people, and we're not board and staff. There's no division. We're all trying to get it right. And I didn't want, we wanted to have that openness so that any idea that anyone has is just as important whether it comes from staff or board. And not that I thought that would permeate, but to us, that is very important because, as board members, we see it, we meet once a month, so we'll see things once a month, but we certainly don't have the depth of the experience of what's really going on. I think as board members, we also want to be open. We want the good news and the bad news. I particularly want more of the bad news because, I'm not going to buy our own press. And we invite that in as opposed to keep it out, because to us, that's how you can, you're going to end up in a better place and a better process by inviting that open dialogue. So, just when you look at it, we're smaller, which, uniquely we have, I'm going to say that's one of the advantages of being in Nevada. We have 7 board members, so, and essentially we have 2 locations. So it's much easier for us to be, interface with staff on an ongoing basis, whether in subcommittee reports, just because we are smaller. It is much easier for us, and we understand that.
And also add to that, we're also the hearing officers, so between the relationships between board members and staff, it's absolutely going to be a lot closer. I think some might say they know us too well and see us too often. So that is a huge advantage, I'll admit, which is a nice one to have when we go into the strategic plan, because we've probably most likely talked about most issues going, man, we got to figure out a way to do X, and it really does help get the ball rolling.
Pastor,
yeah, I think we all agree that the strategic plan is going to be successful if it's implemented, right? So my question to you, Kevin, is how do you get the buy-in from your staff, who really is going to be the people that are going to implement a lot of the visions of your strategic plan? So how does that process work? So you have your not only your chief supervisors, but your staff investigators down to your receptionists buying into your plan?
It's a great question, and I'm only going to answer part of that, and I'd certainly ask Nancy or George or Margie to respond to the second half of it. I think a big part of it is they have to be in the room when you're doing, and I mean engaged in the process in the room when you're doing it, so it can't be the board's plan and then here it is to staff to go implement it when they were really never bought into it. Not much different than running a business. A CEO may have a great idea, and then he tries to roll out, it just simply doesn't work. But I'd certainly, George or Nancy or Margie, if you would respond to the second half of that.
One thing we tried this year, which was a lot more beneficial, is we did an environmental scan for each employee. We handed them the list and said, give us a list of what you think are our strengths, our weaknesses, our threats, and our opportunities. And a lot of them didn't understand what the task was, but then we were able to get that information back and take it to the board in our strategic planning session. So some of the ideas that became part of our strategic plan were actually started with the staff level. And then after we developed the strategic plan, we have weekly meetings with our department heads, and then they in turn have weekly meetings within their own departments and carry that message on and trying to get them more involved. It is a challenge when all of a sudden you just have a plan. It's like, here it is, trying to get everyone to buy in. This year it seemed to be a little bit better, but we are a long way from having the perfect process of involving staff. And Nancy or George or Dan, would you like to comment on that at all? Okay.
As Ms. Green mentioned, I think involving our staff in the SWOT analysis at the beginning of the process made a big difference this year because they felt that what they had to say was considered in our strategic plan, and they saw that in the final draft. Continuing on, that is a struggle. It's something that we all struggle with. Some people are not engaged and others are more engaged. We try to get them involved in these initiatives, get their ideas, give them assignments in developing the initiatives. You know, it's easy for us to muscle something through. We know what we need to accomplish and we can do that. But if we don't involve our staffs in the processes, then they don't have the buy-in and those initiatives fail. So we really work toward that in our staff meetings, in our individual meetings with staff members. But it is something that we are challenged by, and we continue to work on that.
How many people work at the Nevada board?
62.
62.
And you had 62 responses back?
We probably had about 90%, 90, 95%.
Interesting.
We let them remain anonymous.
It's the best way.
That's
You know, one of the points I want to make, and it goes with any strategic plan, or as Kevin mentioned, any business, you need to also have the staff understand that it's a big part for them. I mean, to make their work life a lot better, the environment a lot better, the perception of what they do a lot better. So, I mean, it's a win-win-win across the board. It was nice doing the SWAT because we worked from the bottom up, and it was a lot easier that way.
Steve, I have a question on this. We have a lot of employees at CSLB, obviously, but do they ever say anything about the strategic plan? I mean, from this level on down up, I'm sure they get it. Do they read it? Do they care? Is it?
I doubt if they care. And let me, from my thoughts, because of the size of the organization and being spread all over the state, especially when you get down to Southern California, let's say you're at the San Diego office, they're worried about the San Diego office. And if anything, they want as little to do with Sacramento as possible. Just give us the resources and let us do our job. But we attempt to keep them informed. They all get copies of the strategic plan, and the way that I focus on enforcement because they're all over the state. But David typically talks to his managers, who are supposed to talk to the supervisors, who are supposed to talk to the rank and file, and bring the issues up that way. I think those of you who've attended David's enforcement supervisor meetings, the board members, you know, a lot of the issues come up to David through that. I don't know how, if I could, I'd like to get a copy of what you sent out to your staff and see if something like that would work for us. One concern I always have would be a lot of this stuff would be so tactical instead of strategic. I mean, they might be, I need a new car, you know, that might be all they care about and what they're part of their strategic plan. Where the board, you know, is worried about, you know, 50% employment in the construction industry and, you know, losing 30 positions and, you know, how do we meet all of our mandates? So it intrigues me, and I'm going to ask Margie and look at that. I'm not sure it's possible for us, but it's definitely something to look at. One other comment I wanted to make or ask. Typically, most of the agenda items that we come up with are problems or issues that staff identifies and then puts it on the agenda for the board to deal with. That's probably 90% of our agenda items. How do you come up with, first of all, do you have committees before, are they vetted at a committee level before they come to the board? Or how does Nevada identify issues or agenda items?
Well, because we are such a small state, and it's a small agency, it's much easier. Some of the issues come from board members. Most of it is staff generated, but we talk to our board members frequently. It's not just during meetings. And meeting once a month, we have a lot more interaction with them. So it could come from a staff member as well. Mostly our agenda items are developed by my upper management staff. And then if the board has an issue, they will tell me at the end of the meeting to put something on for the next meeting, and we have a discussion for it. So,
if I might, to explain how the California board has tended to work, I think because we are bigger and we don't meet monthly, we use a committee structure where we have 4 to 6 board members on the 5 different areas of the strategic plan that they're responsible for. And we have always tried to fully vet issues at the committee level so that if an issue comes before the board, ideally, it'll be a 15-0 vote. I mean, some board members, don't feel comfortable with that because maybe they weren't in that committee, and they didn't fully participate. But we've always tried to make sure that the committees really look into an issue before they bring it up to the board, so that the board doesn't waste its time at its quarterly, board meetings. So that's kind of in the way we've approached things. Get it done, get it finally honed before it comes to the board. So I think what Paul's talking about is adding more of an organic input process at the committee level, maybe. Well, something we'll just work with and see what happens. But that's how we do it in California. Everything goes to the committee, and then the committee chairs, report at each board meeting.
And I apologize. We do have committee meetings as well that we have used a lot more this past year. We have our Residential Recovery Fund Committee as one. We have the Classification Subcommittee meeting. We usually meet every month. We have a Finance or Budget Committee. So we do vet some of those issues, but sometimes they may go months without meeting if there's not an issue. So that has been helpful.
One other issue we have, I don't know if you do, is we have to be careful we don't have so many board members at a committee meeting where it becomes a quorum issue. And then Don's always looking, making sure, we have to make sure everything's noticed correctly. We can't accidentally have a quorum at a committee meeting. Do you have similar legal issues?
Yes, we post all of our subcommittee meetings as open meetings. It's 3, and Mr. Rob, maybe you would like to expound on that, what Nevada's open meeting law entails.
Everything's an open meeting. Every committee meeting, every subcommittee meeting, if you have essentially 2 people, it's noticed, you have an agenda, and we're very, very much required to do everything in conformity with the open meeting law.
And something to remember too, our board meetings, about 3/4 of it, we actually hear application denials. So we're still, as a board, listen to those. So, but like what Ms. Green said, I happen to sit on quite a few of the committees. It is nice because it is all open meetings, so there's no behind closed doors. Pretty much to kind of consensus on something that you would, package good enough to bring before the board. And I mean, since I've been on the board over 4 years, it's gone quite well.
One of the things that has intrigued me is obviously the volume of work that the California board manages quarterly. I mean, we meet monthly, and I think even with our Nevada board meeting monthly, there's an overwhelming amount of work that we take on monthly. And I look at what we do, and one of the things that I try to look at as a board member is how do we create the broader stroke that California has created in Nevada, to where we aren't getting mired in the details of the day-to-day, which it doesn't appear that the California board does. It appears that you do a very effective, efficient job of handling it on a broader base. So that's something that I'm intrigued by, and I always ask questions about that, is how does that work so that we don't get caught on the ground floor where it ought to be taken care of by somebody else, and we're operating on a little bit from a 10,000 foot view.
I have a little bit of a response for that from that. Having sat in that chair right there, and I think, Jim, you can say the same thing, and I'm going to warn you, Paul. The day that I became chair, it was an eye-opener. Really, the chair with the registrar handles an incredible amount of that minutia, day after day after day after day. And thank you, Bob, for having put in your year. But I was completely baffled by how much goes on. And I'm sure, Kevin, you have some of that too, because we don't meet that often. So you can't just say, oh, we'll put that on for when we're going to meet next week or something. But plus, we have a registrar who's really good at communicating.
Steve, one last comment on that is talking about really the broader picture of what the role of the board is. And this will kind of just give you an indication, I think we're on a good path in terms of debating well. We said as a board, we were not fulfilling what we believed our role to be. We were way down in the tasks and the tactical and not enough on the strategy and the tactical and looking for the blind spots for the organization because we were way down mired in those details. And so that was an interesting debate. It's hard to give away what you've become accustomed to managing at a board level, but we pushed ourselves to get out of that business and get into the business that of really acting as a board, just like it would be for a public or private company. So I think we've got that. We're probably operating, as Guy said, we're probably operating where we were and where you all operate. We're probably operating somewhere in that middle ground. And I think a lot of it just has to do with scale and size.
Could I ask a question? How much of your time in a board meeting, the typical board meeting, is spent with the license application appeals process or the actual things that are done by either staff or a separate agency in California?
Half?
50%. Or more.
Half, yeah. It used to be probably 85, 90% was in that, and we've pulled that out of the agenda. Keep in mind we have a little bit of a role because each one of us act essentially as an ALJ in the hearing process. So
you're wired to operate down here. I mean, it's part of your
I'm going to be out on an island very quick in this group, but I don't believe that is in the future. Me, for one, I'm going to be pushing to say we need to really look and see if that's really what our role is on a go-forward basis. So I know my fellow board members think a little differently on that, and I won't put myself or them on the spot anymore, but I think that's just continue to push ourselves as well. Because we, in just observing your meeting, what we see is you're probably somewhere at 40,000 feet. We're more comfortable operating maybe at 20,000 feet, just from the agenda. And that's not a criticism at all. It's just different. And I think as we come to these meetings, we try to explore what is the best things you all are doing, and hopefully maybe you're doing the same thing with us, and figure out where, what uniquely works for California is not going to work for Nevada. But there's a lot of commonality that absolutely does work.
Mr. Burke, just to comment off of that, this is my third joint meeting, and I can tell you, walking away from every one of these meetings, we've gone back to our board meetings, and we have made some fundamental changes that gets us in a better direction. A lot of it's just synergy, or just looking else. Right now, as Mr. Burke said, each one of us seven board members, we hear every single case that goes to hearing in the state of Nevada. Now, we're able to do that. That's a separate meeting besides the board meeting. That's twice a month, one up north, one down south. But I could tell you, starting from the fingerprinting, which, it's not rocket science, but just listen to how someone else works. And George didn't get to go through the statistics, but I could tell you just that one little takeaway from this joint meeting has uncovered remarkable results. So I do enjoy coming to these, and every time we go back, we do struggle a little bit when we have a good idea, like, okay, we don't want to do any more hearings, but there's some fundamental things that we need to work through, and we've made some changes. And I could tell you, part of the strategic plan, too, we will just continue to be talking about it. And that's why these meetings are really beneficial, especially for someone like myself. There's some interesting math with this that comes out of the equation. How many employees do we have, guys?
Decreases by the day.
It depends on, So call it 400?
Over 400.
Yeah. So we have approximately 400 with 38 million population. You have 62 with how many people in Nevada? 3 million. So on a percentage basis, we would have 680 employees to equate to our number of employees. So we do run a system that is very different than yours. And I think that what you guys, from my perspective, we're at 40,000 feet and you're at 2. Because I think they're such polar opposites, because to me, being an ALJ is so foreign to our mandate as what we do as a board. It's as far as it could possibly be. And I think what I'm struggling with is, okay, if we're at 40, heck, I just want to get to 38. I mean, I just want to get to a level where I don't want to meet every month. I don't want to change how we do things for a living. I just want to open up communication so that that strategic plan that we do once a year, it tails throughout the entire 12-month process. What we have now is we meet at the beginning of the year, we have a recap the next year. And so we kind of lose touch because we don't have the same meetings you guys do on a regular basis. And so maybe at the committee level, which is what we try to work with as much as we can grab that strategic plan into a committee level of some kind, or our quarterly board meetings of some kind. But some way to get hold of that so it doesn't just go away for a year.
My question is, what's, in terms of acting in the role of hearing officers, what's the backlog? If you meet once a month, or was it twice a month? What kind of backlog do you have? Or do you?
We don't have a backlog. No.
So that pretty much takes care of it.
Yes. And all of our board members rotate as hearing officers, and if they need to do more than one day, we will schedule multiple days. But what has worked well for us also with our strategic plan is every quarter we block out 2 to 3 hours where we have a strategic planning session and an update on our progress. And that keeps the momentum going with the strategic plan. And we do that at the start of the meeting to make sure that we don't get bogged down with other hearing cases that day. So that seems to really work for us. But
you know, and that's something we took from the joint board, because we were envious when you guys were able to talk a lot of strategic direction, and we went back and we actually flopped our agenda when we had those quarterly meetings, saying, you know what, we're going to put this in the front. So therefore, these denial applications, really, they're going to have to wait till we do our business, which is very important. So that was a big fundamental change.
Couple points. There is a inverse relationship between the number of board meetings scheduled per year and the effectiveness. Because I guarantee if we had a board meeting every month, that's all we'd be doing is preparing for board meetings. And Melanie would quit. And what was the other point? Oh, well, it'll come to me.
and I would say if we did not have the application denial hearings, we could get by with quarterly meetings as well.
Oh, that was it. It's my thought, having been in the regulatory arena for 30 years, it sounds like your regulatory structure as a board mirrors that of a lot of the other states where, you know, they were created in maybe 50 years ago, where you didn't have the volume of applicants or the complexity of enforcement or licensing, so it was appropriate for board members to make decisions. Quite frankly, I think you may want to look strategically, if that's what you want your board to do in the future. You may want to look at setting up a committee in statute that reports to the board, or getting a group of ALJs. So you could actually focus more on goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics, more of a policy-making board as opposed to a working board. In fact, I would guess that's how things are going to go throughout the country, except maybe Alabama and Mississippi.
You know, just to, I'm sorry.
I'm pretty much in awe that you guys can even do that, because I look at the complexity of the stuff that David brings and he starts quoting, you know, statute this and that, and my head just starts to spin. So the fact that you guys do that, wow.
And I'll just say, and I won't say more about this topic, because like Mr. Burke alluded to, this is something really, you know, near and dear to all of our hearts. But, you know, one of the biggest benefits, and I'll just throw it out there, especially with today's economy, you know, when you sit down with a list of rules, black and white, and you're ruling on someone getting a license or getting it renewed or whatever, it's one thing. When you come before 7 board members, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of times they come before myself, and I'm thinking, you know, no, this person's getting a license, and you listen to other board members draw questions. You know, we're here to help everybody. A lot of times, I'm swayed to another way. When we listen to each other, ask certain questions, or the opposite, bring up certain questions like, oh, this person should not get their license. So, you know, I was the first one to walk away from, I believe it was the last meeting, going, you know what, we're farming out all our hearings. I'm good with this program. And then we had a board, it was an agenda item, put it on there.
Mr. Hodgson, you're on the record. I've got witnesses of that.
So, but as we talked, it's really, you know, so there's pros and cons to both ways. And it's a big change to go either way.
And I agree, but, you know, as I look at your agenda, and I will go on the record, Mr. Chairman, we literally have a 4-inch binder full of information that we have to go through and study every month, plus another sometimes 1 or 2 1-inch binders that we have to go through, and that's every month. I mean, that's denials, and I do feel like we get mired down in the details, and we miss the opportunity to really manage effectively and do what we should be doing as a board. And again, you know, every time I come here, and every time I enjoy the conversation with different board members, I learn more and more about the way I believe that the Nevada board should be operating as well. So thank you.
Okay, Ms. Green, we'll move on to, we can certainly take these out of order. Do we want to move into licensure, or should we move into enforcement?
Or public affairs.
You want to take that one next?
Do you want to do public affairs?
Thank you. Jennifer Turner again. Is that on? I won't go into too much detail about the senior awareness program and our NASCLA efforts, but I would say, you know, tomorrow marks my 1-year anniversary with the board, and I'm really excited. This is the first day that I started last year, and I've learned so much and feel so happy to be part of this team. Really want to extend a big thank you to Rick and his team, as well as all the staff at NSCB for kind of guiding me along this way and giving me a little bit of creative freedom to bring new ideas to the board. If I could give the last year a little theme, I guess I would call it was really about reshaping the identity and the image of the board. We tried to create a new foundation to start on. How we first started that was through our logo. We changed our logo, we changed our materials, we upgraded our brochures to be more streamlined and be more direct with our consumers. We're starting to expand those resources. We've gone from 3 to 5. We've really enhanced our social media. I think since I first started, we've increased it by 400% in terms of our followers. We don't have as much Twitter followers, but our Facebook seems to be getting more traction. So it's exciting to see the progress that we're making, even though it might be slow or steady. It's certainly progress, and we look forward to what's ahead. One of the other initiatives that we have ongoing that we're actually implementing next week is in partnership with the industry associations. We've put together a home improvement forum, which is taglined of protecting yourself and reducing your liabilities. This was an avenue that, you know, we do our general presentations where, you know, we as the Public Information Office will go out to, you know, senior groups or HOAs or wherever the case may be and do our own presentation. But what we felt was missing was that partnership with the industry, helping the industry get their word out about protecting consumers so that we're a united front. And so what this forum is really targeted toward is it's going to start with the HOAs. We have quite a few large HOAs in Southern Nevada, and we're starting with one of the largest ones. And essentially we'll give our message as a contractors board about hiring licensed contractors, and then we'll open it up to an expert panel of industry associations who will talk to homeowners about you know, what are some common red flags within their own industries that homeowners should be aware of? What are questions that they should ask for specific services, kind of common services that they might see, whether it's plumbing or getting your toilet fixed? How can we educate consumers when a contractor comes into your home to feel like they have a little bit of power ammunition within themselves to have that conversation effectively with a contractor? As part of that, you know, it's a non-solicitation. There's no opportunity for sales or talking about pricing. It's truthfully an educational forum for the homeowner where we want to give them proactive tips for maintenance, how to prevent disasters from occurring within their home. And hopefully we'll have some good news to report on that in the future, but that's one initiative that's starting next week that we're very excited about. Our joint media opportunities have been really beneficial. Hopefully with our upcoming event, we'll have some additional means for progressing those avenues. And one thing that I wanted to talk about were this year we really focused on partnering, and we did that through a series of roundtable discussions that focus on a wide variety of issues. I bet you we probably had 20 to 30 at a minimum with various industry groups and state agencies and representatives, and that has led to some successful outcomes for us. We have a pilot program that's expected to launch with Home Depot and our building officials to put kiosks for permits in their stores. We're very excited about that opportunity, and as we looked at our strategic plan while we're on that discussion, going forward, we realized that we have a lot of great partnerships, but we need to start prioritizing them. We need to hone those in a little bit to identify what our top needs are. So going forward, we're looking to kind of streamline what those opportunities would be, develop an actual partnership plan that is issue-driven, so at the end of the year we can come back and see the progress and the progress that we've made relative to those issues versus just meeting to meet for the sake of FaceTime. As we look to developing our own communications plan, our focus in communications is really looking at the various audiences. One of our biggest challenges that we see is tracking the outcome. We're charged with educating all of Nevada, and as a public affairs, as a PR person, then you just don't educate everybody. That's not your audience. So we need to target whether it's seniors, realtors, contractors, finding the various audiences and who we want to target, and then developing key strategies that will reach out to those individuals, whether it's through publications, these presentations, partnering initiatives. We really want to advance our opportunities, and I know we're just kind of scratching the surface as far as this last year goes, and hopefully this next year we'll get a little bit deeper in terms of the opportunities that we can create for ourselves. One thing that I'm excited about that we've done this past year is really taken an internal look. We looked at revamping not only our image through our collateral materials, but as Margie mentioned, we reformatted our board meetings so that we could have better communication with our board members. We've been working with staff to enhance their educational opportunities, as well as the top-down communication. Through our management meetings, we've really opened the door to allow staff to express their interests and issues, as well as giving them the tools that they need to help us meet our objectives. One of the things that we track are customer experience. We have a pretty low sampling rate because all we can do at this point are customer service surveys. And so one thing that staff started doing with the help of management was putting a tagline at the bottom of their emails. So anytime they would correspond with somebody, they would get a link to the survey. And just through that initiative, we've seen positive feedback coming back immediately from our customers. We've had positive feedback singling out staff members, which is great because it allows us to forward that information back to staff. And so really this communication and connecting and understanding our customers is what's helping us to evolve. Some of our upcoming initiatives are going to be a Train the Trainer program, where we're going to work with industry associations to help them become our voice, our extended messenger for us. Since they're the ones that are in the field with the customers on a day-to-day basis, we want to make sure they have the talking points and the tools to sell themselves, to educate consumers on why it's better that they hire a licensed contractor versus the unlicensed. We've worked on some of our brochures for the Recovery Fund to include the statutory language that contractors are required to provide homeowners, so that instead of contractors putting a little disclaimer on their contract, they can now provide our brochure as a means to fulfill that end. We will continue to look at unlicensed contracting and how we can better message to our contractors the efforts that the board is making. That always is a challenge, and the feedback we get, it's always presumed that we're not doing anything. And so we struggle, and we try to identify new ways to educate them about our processes, involve them. We actually have an association who's contacted us to take the initiative on an industry watch campaign. So they have a program in place, and we're hoping to expand that to other associations who will find value in working with the Contractors Board for the reporting and streamline of that information. But I just wanted to thank you again for the past year of experiences, and I'm very excited to come back next year and report on more updates. Thanks.
Very good. Chairman, how are we doing on time? Does everyone need a break? Should we keep pressing forward?
I think we've both did bricks as we go.
Okay,
So go ahead.
good. Okay. Probably the next item that we want to talk about is the unlicensed contracting, and I know that's something that we've had on the agenda the last few years. Jennifer touched on some of the topics there, but what's the feeling on the board on how bad is it in California? We certainly have an idea on Nevada, and what are we collectively doing? Is there anything new and different we're doing that we haven't done? If we could gift anything to California, we'd gift the idea, not the money that is in it. It's that residential recovery fund. That is a phenomenal resource we have that we are going to tap to fight unlicensed contracting because, and we'll get into that more. So let me just open that up for a discussion and debate on how bad is it in California, and we'll share our experiences and see if there's innovative ideas out there.
I'm going to put on a different hat right now, and I'm going to be a consumer because recently I started doing some work in my house, little work, moving light fixtures, painting, different things like that. And I like to do that kind of stuff myself a lot, but I sort of discovered between work and this and my son's sports schedule, the hours between 2 a.m. and 4 just weren't cutting it anymore. So I thought, okay, I'm going to hire some help. It's really hard to hire help if you know what to look for. I went through the Penny Saver, I went through Craigslist, and I decided that I was just not going to hire any kind of an unlicensed contractor, even if it was for a $125 thing. I figured everybody's going to be licensed. And I thought, so I'm going through here and I'm calling all these people, and then they're telling me they're licensed, and then I go to the website, and that's not their name doesn't match up. And I thought, I'm a pretty sophisticated user, and I know what I'm looking for, but the average person really is going to have a hard time wading through that. And I was kind of sad for people trying to get these little things done and how hard it must be for them. Last week I was lamenting to Steve one night in the middle of the night, and I was going home to meet my, hopefully a licensed contractor, and everything seemed to check out. I met the guy outside the house. He walks in. He hands me his license card and said, would you like to see my ID so that you'll know that's me? And rather than just think, oh, wow, I was so impressed and thankful that I almost started to cry. And I thought, that's a sad state of affairs. It was just interesting for me to be on the consumer side. If you wanted to do it the right way, maybe it's harder than you think to do it the right way. So.
Well, I think on our side, we have a big... We have a pretty big challenge on our side, I think, without such a recovery program or without a bond of any significance in convincing consumers that they should go with licensed contractors, because our argument quickly turns into they passed the test. But beyond passing the test, a $12,500 bond isn't a lot of money to rationalize using a licensed guy to do your bathroom that's going to cost, $25,000, $30,000, or a kitchen that's going to cost $100,000. That $12,500 bond doesn't mean anything. We have no recovery fund, so you can't provide, say you're insured. Now, we have arguments about workers' comp and other things. Don't get me wrong, we have arguments, but it's challenging for us. We have a tougher time than you do without something like that residential recovery fund. It might help us if you explained how it works and where the money comes from.
Where the money comes from.
George.
Yeah. George, if you can just give us a high-level overview of the recovery fund.
The money for the fund, and there again, when we set up the fund back in 1999, probably the first thing we did steal from California. We stole it from Arizona. They had a fund there. We got together with people and said, what's right with your fund, what's wrong with your fund? And we wrote our law to cover the differences there. So it's unique because the funding for it is an annual assessment from the contractors based on their monetary license limit. We started collecting that for a year before we made any payments. So that had the fund grow. The fund has grown over the years. We've paid out generally about $1 million a year. We worked up, the first year was $17,000, and we start going up from there, a few years up there. The assessments that come in, we pay up to $35,000 to a homeowner. And to me, the selling point on using a licensed contractor is licensed contractors paying into the fund. If something goes wrong and your project isn't completed and we can't get it completed, we can pay you back what you paid the contractor to get things fixed. That's the selling point. If it's a non-licensed contractor, we're not going to be able to help you out there. Now, we've had instances of licensed contractors loaning their license to unlicensed contractors, and the guy going out working under the original contractor's name and number, and everything you can imagine that can occurs in the recovery fund. You'll have homeowners that are excessive on their claims. You'll have owner-builder claims coming in, which drive us crazy. You have default judgments coming in. So we run across all of those, and the bottom line is that we have to look at each case individually to make sure it meets the standards. Having that, every other month we have a meeting, 3 board members, they address the cases. They address the cases where there's an issue, be it something that is not exactly right with the law, whether the homeowner is asking for $15,000, we're only going to recommend giving them $10,000, some issue like that. If the claim comes in, the homeowner wants $10,000, we recommend $10,000, then it goes to the executive officer to approve, and that cuts down a lot of the cases. So working through the particular cases, one of the things that we did pick up from Arizona, and they told us, they said, if you get anything in there, make sure you get in there, it's not subject to judicial review. And we got that in our law. Because if it is subject to judicial review, every homeowner that doesn't get the amount of money they want is going to sue you, going to take you to court. We don't have that problem. And that just eliminates a tremendous amount of issues that could come up. It doesn't stop somebody from filing for judicial review. Then we get into court, and the court says, no, it's out the door, so it's a lot cheaper and a lot faster. It's a tremendous benefit to people. It's nice giving people some money back. There's some heartbreaking cases there where you can't give them their losses back. $35,000 may just be a minor part of what they ended up paying or what they ended up losing.
Is that the max?
$35,000 is the max. $400,000 per contractor. We've gone over that a couple times. We had one contractor a couple years ago where the losses were about $700,000. So we had to prorate the awards back to the homeowners. Every homeowner got 60% of what their claims were. We schedule these hearings. We have 3 board members. We can generally, last meeting we had 10 cases. We did them in 45 minutes. We've had some cases where we go 20 cases in an hour. I mean, you get it down to a science. You get it down to what you're going to recommend, what the issues are, and you go through them very, very fast. But you do definitely have to go through them and make sure everything is proper. There again, we've got $5 million in the kitty. That's good, and we can look at it right now. Part of our strategic plan was to make sure things were solvent. I feel confident we're solvent for at least the next 5 years with what we've got. We actually cut the fees down by 15% this year for the contractors because the kitty was just getting too much in it. So yeah, it's a tremendous asset and tremendous selling tool. And to say, yeah, yes, your job was held up. Yes, there's a problem. Yes, the contractor walked away from it. We revoked his license, but here we can help you out. It may not be 100% repaired, but it's better than nothing, and we're giving you some money back to help you through the process.
So when you went to cut the fees, did you guys just decide internally to cut the fees and that was it?
Yes, the statute has it cannot exceed a maximum. So
There's flexibility in it.
yes, there is. And so we did an analysis of claims paid out and also with the reduction of fees coming in, and determined that to reduce it by 15% for this year would be a good move.
So I'm assuming because your legislature meets so infrequently that your statutes allow for a great deal of flexibility in all across the board for you guys. Is that?
Not necessarily, no.
No. There are some changes that I'd like to see, but they're risky. You know, there are definitely some changes, some loopholes that we've seen showing up in there. We'd like to see change, but once you go back in to fix that, you're opening up a whole can of worms.
Well, the numbers are relatively astounding when you just, again, do the math of Nevada to California. If we have 10 times the number of contractors, then that would be a $50 million pool that we would have to solve, which would require a whole lot of staffing from the CSLB to administer on that basis, because we're not doing what you guys do.
Right now, a claim comes in, it goes to the original investigator who had the original workmanship claim. He validates the amount of the claim, i.e. get 3 bids for the repairs, or make sure that there was a contract there, they were the owner of the property. You know, he then turns it in for review, and myself and the administrative assistant look things over, get the paperwork done, get it out, and get it handled. So this year we've only had 60, we'll have about 70 claims this year. The other previous years we've had about 120, 150. So it's manageable with 2 right now. What you're looking at is you're looking at a pretty good size group of people. You won't have the luxury to have three board members sit down and go over every case. It's just going to be too many. So any system going there has to be more like say Florida. Florida has, you know, all 200 claims go before their board, and they, you know, consent agenda, they approve it with the recommendations of staff or something like that. So you're unique enough, but it is a big component that you have to look at. And I can't even imagine the number of claims you get.
Oh, yeah. And then the state would want to borrow all the money.
Yeah. Yeah, that some states have had recovery funds have gone out of business because the states took their money, and or it was based on building permits. There aren't any building permits anymore. The state took their money, or they were based on something else. The fact that we have an annual or biannual fee that they pay into it is what has kept the fund healthy. The fact that we haven't been clipped on that. It could happen tomorrow. And Mr. Burke, when we do the reports on it, he'll always say, well, how's the fund? I'll say, well, the fund's good, claims are down, everything is fine as of 30 seconds ago. I can walk back to my desk and it just hits the fan. When a contractor comes in, he's got 100, homeowners out there he's just stiffed. So that's what you don't know.
What did you say your assessment is based on?
Assessment is based on the monetary limit of the contractor. They'll have a monetary limit of, say, $100,000, $1 million, or an unlimited. It's based on what their number is. And I don't believe California's got monetary limits.
No.
So, I know when we were getting the law, Ms. Green spent a lot of time and a lot of committee action trying to figure out how to fund it. And there were a lot of ideas thrown up there.
But I'll tell you, I'm a B2 general contractor, and I believe my biannual assessment's $300. I mean, it's not huge, but that's my portion for 2 years funding this $5 million recovery fund, which I get to sit on, and it is kind of the nice part of being on the board when you get to award a homeowner money because they used a licensed contractor. So, I mean, it's a little bit of joy.
And I would just add that as the Nevada State Contractor Board, this is one of the most phenomenal, impactful things that we do, not only to on behalf of the licensed contractors in keeping their name good, but also with the homeowners who have been damaged by bad contractors. And Jennifer's done a great job over the last year because this is something that we didn't advertise very well. and it certainly, with the underground economy and everything else, this is a great point for licensed contractors and the board to bring up and sing that song till the cows come home, because it is a beautiful thing for everybody involved. The licensed contractors get to say, you know, if you don't use a licensed contractor, you don't get this protection, and the homeowners have the protection if they use a licensed contractor. So from both sides, it just is a wonderful experience. I'm actually the chairman, and it's one of the greatest committees that I sit on, because you get to see people's faces that were injured. Some of them have been in the process for some time, 90, 120 days. But when they finally come before us and they get an award, and their journey's over, and they've been compensated for their injuries, that's tremendous.
Their original case may take 2-3 years to get through the process. If they're in court, who knows how long it takes. When they file a recovery fund claim, we're required by law to act on it within 6 months. We've got this system down, the process down now, where they file a claim, they're going to have their claim awarded within 90 days. And within 30 days after the award, they come down and they pick up the money. At the beginning of each meeting, Mr. Wells has a little spiel, and there's 2 important things in there that he points out to the people. There's no taxpayer money in this fund, and also, I believe the quote is, this is good contractors paying for bad contractors. And it is helpful to the people, and they're very happy to. The best time of the year when we give the award, the best month of the year is November, because 30 days later they get their checks. They get their checks before Christmas.
Couple comments from California. First of all, politics is the art of the possible, and it'll never happen in California. I'll let we did a report on recovery fund about 10 years ago, and I'll go ahead and send out a report to the board members, a copy, so you can see what we reviewed 10 years ago. One of the issues, though, was what you just said, having the good contractors pay for the actions of the bad contractors. And generally, the industry in this state don't feel that they should have to pay for the actions of the bad contractors, that the court system or the board or whatever should do that. So because of the industry wouldn't support it, and right now, we can't do. We're actually going to be looking next year or two, scaling back of some of what we do because the industry is so hammered. We're really going to look at all of our laws and regulations and see, do we really need this? I mean, do what we can to streamline the operating environment for the construction industry in California. Someone mentioned how bad things were in California. I'm not sure what you're talking about, the economy or the state of the board, but if I'd like to give you an overview. I just did a report on that and some things to consider in the future, let you know what's going on in California. First of all, the Congressional Budget Office estimate that as sequestration and the Bush tax cuts are allowed to lapse at the end of the year, that we'll see a recession early in next year. GDP will drop between 1.5 and 1.6%. So that's at the federal level. In California, we are seeing signs of recovery in the economy overall. They tend to be focusing on trade, tourism, and the tech industries. The construction industry is reeling. However, there is work in the Bay Area, in San Jose. There's new home construction and a lot of remodeling occurring in Orange County. That's probably why you can't find anyone. Do your work. You go to Inland Empire, they estimate they don't need to, I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, they won't need to build another single-family home for 20 years. This is caused by a couple of things. Number one, they overbuilt. But as the population ages, baby boomers are going to downsize. They want to get They're not going to be buying new houses. They're going to go into assisted living, smaller homes, flooding even more of those single-family homes into the marketplace. The younger people who are entering the marketplace are more interested in rentals, condos, and living in urban centers. So from both ends, the need for the old single-family home on a lot is pretty much a thing of the past for vast portions of California, Inland Empire, Sacramento. Elk Grove is bustling, but there's not a whole need so new home construction is not going to be a driver for the economy. We are also seeing some federal money finally trickling into California, so there's some infrastructure stuff. If you've been to San Francisco lately, it's like Shanghai. There's cranes everywhere. So it's very hit or miss throughout the state. It's generally increasing and improving, but at a fairly slow rate. I think we're going to see a lot more remodels, a lot more upgrades, but the classic construction industry is going to have to change in California because there's new markets and there's new things that are going to be done based on the demographics and the state of the economy. Jim, is there anything else that that stuff you sent me, did I cover it pretty?
The information that I sent Steve is actually done locally, is done by Southern California Association of Governments, but it's done, that's a regional master planning organization that really, their primary goal is to figure out future growth patterns and direct federal money towards, public infrastructure projects. But yeah, their projections is that everything's moving into the urban cores. If you follow in California, this is for Nevada, I don't know if you have any greenhouse gas emission requirements or not, but they're forcing all the land use into transportation nodes now. So all the federal money is going to be going towards rail and building apartment buildings around transportation centers or smaller housing units, and that seems to be where the push is now, is to push everybody back into urban core due to high gas prices and all that. That seems to be where the trend's at. So we're probably going to see a lot more teardowns too and rebuilds than we've seen in the past.
Any other comments from the Nevada board members? I think that wraps up our roundtable discussion, or anything anyone wants to add to the roundtable this afternoon? Very good. Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Okay, one thing I'd like to add is it was very informative, and really appreciate everyone on the Nevada board. Your friendship and fellowship has been just phenomenal. We just really appreciate it.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you for everything. And with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment under agenda item N. Well, I got a double move, so I imagine that's a motion in a second. To adjourn, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.